In one of the rooms of the stone building, a girl was held by the hair. The girl was wearing a skirt, a light blouse with a bow around her neck. The girl's face turned red, and with tears in her eyes, she asked what was the reason for doing this to her. One of the two girls was holding a girl in a blouse by the hair, the other was holding a stick. They laughed and called names to a girl in a blouse with a bow around her neck. Two girls laughed at the third. They said through their laughter that this was the only thing a lady from the Hybel family was capable of. The girl with the bow on her neck was crying and thought that maybe someone would already help her. Another girl with her hair in ponytails came up to them. She was laughing angrily and holding a bucket of water in her hands. A few more girls were standing behind. The girl with the bucket went to the front and stumbled. The girl with the bucket fell to the floor and doused everyone around with water from the bucket. The girl with the bow on her neck looked away in fright. The surrounding girls began to scold the girl with tails on her head because of the spilled bucket. The girl who had been crying earlier pulled away and watched what was happening with surprise on her face. The next moment, one of the mops seemed to come to life and began to strike at the girls around her. One of the girls had a mop in her mouth. The girls began to fall to the ground and scream in pain. The girl with the bow on her neck looked at them in fright. One girl had a bucket on her head, the second had a rag in her mouth, and the third had her clothes torn to shreds. A girl with a bow on her neck looked in front of her. A girl with torn clothes stood in front of her and said that she was really sleeping now. The girl's hair with a bow on her neck began to develop. She noticed a strange glow and turned to the open window. A window was open behind the girl, behind which the city could be seen. Not far from the window there was a large tree, on the branches of which stood a black dragon and looked at a girl with a bow around her neck. The girl thought that she wondered who had done all this. The girl was smiling broadly and holding a black dragon in her arms. The second girl looked slyly in front of her. Gloves were on her hands. The third girl looked viciously in front of her. She had a mopstick in her hands. Events are being moved back a year. The girl with the bow on her neck was named Charlotte. She was walking around the territory with a white dog. The two men were discussing Charlotte. A blonde man named Richard was her fiancé. Charlotte's hair was pulled back in a braid. She was smiling broadly and hugging a white dog. The dog closed its eyes and cuddled up to Charlotte. Charlotte was sitting at the table and holding papers in her hands, and a man was standing next to her. She was involved in the affairs of the country. There were writing materials on the table. At other times, Charlotte was minding her own business. A woman came up to her and said that Charlotte was being called by her father, Hina. There were several people standing in front of the man who was wearing a long cape. They were all in a large room with a long carpet on which stood a throne. The man with the mustache said that everyone had finally arrived. One of the guests with a smile on his face said that Hina had a surprise for them because he couldn't just collect them. Hina lifted the cape from behind which the girl was peeking out. The girl was holding on to Hina's cape. Her face was red with embarrassment. She timidly said that her name was Lily and she was pleased to meet the people around her. The girl with long and messy hair was standing in place. Her hands were joined. Hina said that he apologizes to others for bringing them all together, but this girl is the daughter of his younger brother. The man with the mustache closed his eyes and began to tell that a thief had broken into the girl's house, and as a result, he left her without parents. Charlotte imagined the girl sitting against the wall with her head down. Charlotte thought that Lily had lost her parents at such a young age. She must have been lonely. Charlotte came up to Lily and took her hands. Then she said that she was sure that Lily had been having a hard time all this time. Charlotte approached Lily's face and said that if Lily needed anything, she could contact Charlotte and from now on, they would live happily together. Lily, with a smile on her face and tears, said that she agreed with Charlotte. All the family members surrounded Lily and began to say that they were very glad that their family had become bigger today and they should celebrate this event. Lily's hair was very disheveled. After meeting Charlotte and the others, Lily's face was greatly distorted. She began to smile broadly and maliciously. The two girls were in a room with high ceilings. Charlotte said it was her room, but now she's also Lily. This room is especially well lit by the sun. Lily looked around enthusiastically, then she looked at Charlotte, who offered to show her the academy. The girls were walking through the academy grounds. They were dressed in academic uniforms. The other girls who studied at the same academy started discussing Lily's sudden appearance. The whole academy was discussing the beauty of Charlotte and Lily. Lily walked next to Charlotte and smiled broadly. Then they noticed a blonde girl carrying a stack of paper. Charlotte approached the girl with the papers and offered her help. The girl replied that she would not accept Lily's help, as she did not want to cry her hands. Lily said with a smile in her eyes that if a girl needs help, she can always turn to her. Then Lily walked away from the girls. The surrounding girls looked at Lily with surprise on their faces. Charlotte stood behind the girls and listened to their conversation that Lily was not only beautiful, but she also had a good character. Charlotte thought that Lily quickly settled into the academy and became popular. She used to think so. Charlotte was walking through the academy and heard in one of the classrooms a conversation between girls who said that Charlotte's fiancé had decided to marry Lily. The two girls were sitting at the table and continued to discuss all sorts of gossip about Lily and Charlotte. Charlotte was peeking at them through the window in the door. Charlotte imagined her fiancé walking arm in arm with Lily. Charlotte thought that all these conversations could not be true. Charlotte opened the door and announced that she was back. The two girls started whispering behind Charlotte's back. Charlotte noticed the girls whispering behind her back. Charlotte was holding a bag in her hands. She turned to the girls and said that maybe something had happened and the girls would tell her. The girls began to leave Charlotte and spoke viciously and badly about her. Charlotte stared after the girls in surprise. Charlotte started walking down the hallway. She went to one of the doors and heard a noise. Charlotte began to think that why girls were behaving like that to her. Was it really Lily's voice she was hearing now? Charlotte remembered the conversation between the two girls about Lily and her fiancé. Charlotte looked into the room and said that Lily was here. Charlotte looked at the girls who discussed Lily. She was crying. The girls comforted Lily and said that if Charlotte did anything else to her, she should contact them. Charlotte looked at the girls and thought that she was really hurting Lily. Charlotte came into the room and asked if the girls could explain what was going on. Lily began to cry even harder and cling to the girls around her. The girls hugged Lily and glared at Charlotte. Charlotte looked at the girls in surprise. The girls looked at each other and began to take Lily out of the room, while they said that they did not expect such bad things from Charlotte. Charlotte ran after the girls. Charlotte stopped and began to think that she did not understand what the girls were talking about. She would like to hear an explanation from Lily. The girls walked next to Lily. Lily carefully turned around and looked at Charlotte. Lily's face twisted horribly, and she began to laugh viciously. Charlotte looked ahead in surprise and shock. She began to think that it was on this day that her life changed forever. Lily began to make donations and began to communicate more and more with Charlotte's fiancé. While Charlotte had to account for all the consequences, it lasted until one moment. Charlotte turned out to be in one of the rooms of the large academy. The woman who accompanied her said that now it would be Charlotte's room. There was a torn curtain on the windows and cobwebs on the ceiling. Charlotte stared fearfully in front of her. She looked at the attendant and said that this gloomy room would really be hers now. The woman did not answer and slammed the door on the other side, thereby leaving Charlotte alone in a gloomy room. Charlotte stood in the middle of the room, which instantly turned dark. Charlotte opened the door and ran out of the room. She did not understand what could have happened to her room. There was a wreath of flowers hanging on the door of Charlotte's room. Charlotte was all red. She started to open the door with horror, saying in her head that she did not understand what was inside. Charlotte began to look around the whole room. She began to think that where had the portrait of her mother gone? She did not have such a gorgeous bed, and also a chandelier appeared here. Charlotte was standing in front of Lily. Lily asked Charlotte why she was here. Charlotte started screaming that Lily had to explain everything to her. Lily, in turn, began to smile maliciously. The next moment, Lily started screaming loudly. At Lily's sharp cry, Charlotte jumped up in fright. Lily put her hands to her face, and footsteps began to be heard in the hallway. One of Charlotte's brothers comes into the room and asks what happened here. Lily hugged him and said that Charlotte came to her room and started yelling at her. Charlotte's brother started shouting angrily that this was Lily's room now, and Charlotte had to leave immediately. Charlotte started to say in fright that she just wanted to know why her room had changed. The brothers started saying how much more Charlotte had to make Lily suffer. The guys started pointing the finger at Charlotte and saying that they all know how Charlotte bullied Lily. Charlotte jumped back in surprise. Lily was in tears, and she started snuggling up to one of Charlotte's brothers. Charlotte's eyes reflected the disapproving glances of her brothers. One of the brothers raised his hand and said that Charlotte should leave this room immediately. Charlotte covered her face with her hands and started running. Lily stood surrounded by her brothers. She looked at Charlotte and smiled maliciously. Charlotte lay on the bed in her room and thought that when exactly Lily told others about these accusations, could she really have come up with all this herself? Charlotte remembered herself and her father. Then she began to think that even if she tried to justify herself, no one would listen to her. She could only rely on her father. There was a noise at Charlotte's door, and she sat up on her bed. A woman came into the room with a tray with food on it. Charlotte looked at the tray in surprise and asked why it was there. The dark-haired girl began to smile maliciously and replied that now Charlotte would only eat in her room. Charlotte's eyes were filled with horror. The girl who was holding the tray pushed it into Charlotte's stomach. Charlotte did not expect such an act from the girl and pulled back. All the food that was on the tray, fell on the floor in front of Charlotte and completely stained her high-heeled shoes. Charlotte collapsed to the ground next to the tray. The dark-haired girl started to leave and finally said that Charlotte had received her food properly, which was the last one for today. Tears began to appear in Charlotte's eyes. Then she began to scream that she was the daughter of the Hibble family. She had the right to eat with all members of her family on an equal footing, and, in general, she did not understand who could do this to her. The dark-haired girl turned around and angrily said that all the orders had been wrung out by Charlotte's fathers. Charlotte was sitting on the floor, and a void appeared around her. Charlotte covered her head with her hands, and many eyes appeared around her. Charlotte began to think that even her father had abandoned her, and there was no one left with her. After a while, Charlotte ended up at the academy. She was walking down the corridor, and everyone around her was watching her with disapproving eyes. Lily was hugging the girls and laughing. Charlotte was alone and stood aside. The girls who accompanied Lily noticed Charlotte and began to speak unflatteringly about her and take Lily aside. Lily turned to the side where Charlotte was standing. At first her face was calm, then in an instant it distorted into an evil smile. Lily put her hand to her face and said she gets scared when she's alone. The girls began to cheer Lily on. Charlotte stood aside and watched what was happening. The girls were at the end of the corridor. Charlotte opened her drawer with things that were all filled with water. They had deteriorated. Charlotte stood and looked at her locker. The girls started telling her that unless Charlotte's locker smells like a garbage chute, it's really disgusting. Charlotte took the bag and pulled all the things from the locker into this bag. Charlotte was holding a bag on the ground near the place where the garbage is thrown out. Someone was looking at Charlotte from the window, and the next moment Charlotte is wearing leaves with bugs and maggots. Charlotte gets very scared and starts screaming. Then she fell to the ground and covered her head with her hands. Charlotte looked up at the window, from which she heard the laughter of Lily and several other girls. Charlotte thought she didn't understand why Lily was doing this to her. The girls from the academy were sitting in the dining room. Charlotte was sitting with everyone. The surrounding girls were discussing Charlotte. Charlotte's father was in the dining room, and he was also accompanied by a woman who was dressed all in black. Lily noticed Charlotte's father and responded to him. Lily ran up to Charlotte's father and started hugging him. They started talking about Charlotte's father's visit to the academy. The father of nations was praising Lily, and his gaze shifted to the side. Charlotte's father noticed her. She was sitting at the table. Charlotte was covered in dirt and with a tired expression on her face. Charlotte looked up and looked at her father. Charlotte's father was lying in a rage. He rushed to the side where his daughter was sitting. Charlotte noticed that her father was heading towards her and pulled away. Charlotte's father came up to her and pushed her. Then he angrily said that how could a man like Charlotte look at him like that? Charlotte fell to the floor. Her face was red from the blow. Charlotte's father's hand was shaking with anger, and he said that she should be ashamed as a member of the Hebel family. The girls around Charlotte laughed at her. Charlotte was looking down in fright. Her cheek was red. The girls around her said that even her father had turned his back on Charlotte. Charlotte turned and tried to leave. At this time, Lily ran up to Charlotte's father and said that even if Charlotte had offended her, then her father should not punish Charlotte. Charlotte's father anxiously mentioned Lily's name. Tears appeared in Lily's eyes. She screamed that it was all her fault. Charlotte's father and the others were looking at Lily. Charlotte was reflected in her father's eyes, and he said that the other side of Charlotte had been revealed. Charlotte covered her face with her hands. She was in a panic. She was surrounded by people and looked at her accusingly. Charlotte remembered Lily laughing maliciously. Charlotte was in her room. She remembered the condemning faces of her loved ones. Charlotte thought that no one trusted her anymore. She wanted someone to help her. The people were looking at a beautiful box. The next moment, Charlotte heard a rustle outside the window. She got up from the bed and stared thoughtfully out the window. Charlotte went outside. She began to inspect the area, and the next moment, the bushes began to move. When Charlotte saw the bushes moving, she was scared. Charlotte's face turned red. She leaned her hand against her chest and tried to see what was in the bushes. Then Charlotte reached out to the bushes and lifted them up. From under a thick bush, the muzzle of a small dragon, which had black scales, looked at Charlotte. Charlotte opened her eyes wide. She stared in surprise at the unusual animal. Charlotte's hair was sticking out in all directions. Charlotte was sitting on her knees by the bush. She lifted one part of the bush and looked at the animal. Charlotte asked in surprise that she was wondering what his name was and who he was. The animal was looking at Charlotte. Charlotte and the animal ended up in her room. The animal was lying on the bed and looked at Charlotte warily. Charlotte held her hand at the animal's head and magic circles appeared in front of it. Charlotte put her hand on her chest and smiled. Then she said that if the animal was noticed, there would be a fuss. The animal could stay in her room at any time. Charlotte stroked the animal, which was sitting on a pillow, and said that she needed to come up with a name for it somehow. Charlotte put her finger to her face and thought about it, but she heard a noise outside the door. Charlotte began to cover the animal with a blanket. A dark-haired girl came into the room. She was holding a plate in her hand. Then she said that she had brought Charlotte food. Charlotte looked at the dark-haired girl and thanked her. Charlotte went up to the dark-haired girl and took a plate with liquid. Then she said that, and why didn't they bring a spoon? The dark-haired girl looked away from Charlotte and said that there was no need for a spoon since Charlotte looked like a dog. Charlotte was very surprised to hear the words of the dark-haired girl. There was an animal hiding in the blanket behind Charlotte. It peeked out from under the blanket and watched the girls warily. The dark-haired girl turned to the door and said that did Charlotte really want to be treated like a noble? Did she really think that her crimes would go unpunished? The dark-haired girl shouted that she did not even want to enter this terrible room. The girl finished speaking and slammed the door with all her might. Charlotte held the plate in her hands and jerked at the noise of the door. After hearing everything from the dark-haired girl, Charlotte began to shake and tried her best to hold back the tears rolling in her eyes. Charlotte turned around and noticed a small animal peeking out from behind the blanket. Charlotte sat down on the bed next to the animal and said that he had to watch a pathetic sight, but that's okay. She was already used to such treatment. The shadow of the trees was falling on the window of Charlotte's room. She was sitting on the bed and began to say that previously there was a lot of sunlight in her room, but the sun's rays almost do not enter the current room. Charlotte pushed the plate towards the animal and said that he shouldn't worry. It was just vegetable soup. The animal looked warily at Charlotte's smiling face. After thinking a little, the animal approached the plate and began to carefully eat the vegetable soup that Charlotte gave him. The animal began to eat soup. Charlotte smiled and said that she was very glad that the animal trusted her. She still wondered why everyone turned away from her. Hearing these words, the animal looked at Charlotte in surprise. Charlotte looked around her room and said that rumors began to spread quickly. No one believed her, not the residents of the mansion of the Inhumans from the academy. Charlotte imagined herself in the spotlight and surrounded by people who gradually began to move away from her. Then she went on to say that nothing like this had ever happened to her. She did not understand what she had done wrong. Charlotte began to shake. She saw the disapproving looks of people in front of her and said that she tried to find out everything from Lily, but she was completely overcome with fear. Charlotte wiped her eyes with her hand from tears. She began to say with a smile on her face that the animal probably did not even understand her. She apologized for having to listen to Charlotte. The animal was sitting on Charlotte's pillow and looking at her. Then he got up from the pillow and walked over to her. The animal began to fawn over Charlotte. She raised her hand in surprise. Charlotte had tears on her face. She hugged the animal and with a smile on her face said that the animal really decided to comfort her. She was grateful to him for that, only the animal did not leave her. Charlotte stroked the animal's head. He closed his eyes with pleasure. Xavier opened his eyes. His gaze was full of determination. He thought that all Charlotte's words were very clear to her. At this time, the animal began to remember how many people crowded on the platform. Several men in uniform began to inspect the car. The guys who were standing on the platform started saying that it seems the train hit a high school student. One of the guys was filming everything on camera. A dark-haired young man was lying on the rails under the train carriage. His eyes were open. The animal thought that he understood Charlotte since he used to be a human. The young man thought that he should have died in that collision, but he woke up in the body of a little chimera, and then he realized that he had been reborn in another world. The chimera was in the territory among other unusual animals. The boy recalled that for the sake of survival he had to fight with hostile people and animals, but one day he was attacked and wounded by a monster. The boy in the chimera's body screamed in pain. The chimera fell from a high cliff. He landed on the bushes. The wounded guy in the body of a chimera sat under the bushes and thought that he would really die in this world. After a while, bushes opened up in front of the guy in the body of the chimera. He looked in front of him and saw Charlotte. The guy in the body of the little chimera stared in surprise in front of him. His mouth was slightly open. He wondered if an angel had appeared in front of him now. Charlotte held the chimera on her lap and hugged him. At that time, he thought that Charlotte was his savior, and he wanted to repay her for this kindness. The windows in the brick building were darkened. The guy in the chimera's body thought that a lot had happened to Charlotte. He wanted to try to solve her problems as a thank you. Charlotte started to change clothes. The chimera turned away. Charlotte stroked the chimera's head and said that he should not leave the room. He just had to wait for his return. The door to Charlotte's room slammed shut. The guy in the body of the little chimera tensed up and thought that now was the time to activate the invisibility ability. The chimera opened its wings and thought that with this ability, he could be invisible to everyone, but he could be touched. If not for this ability, he would have been defeated long ago. The guy in the chimera's body remembered Charlotte and thought that he needed to get out of the room to understand why Charlotte was being treated like this. The chimera jumped on the door handle and opened it. The girl with the mop in her hands began to look around in all directions. The guy in the body of a chimera began to move around the academy. The guy in the body of a chimera opened his mouth in surprise and thought that this was really a gorgeous mansion. He found himself in a large room that was being cleaned by several people. The guy in the body of the chimera noticed the dark-haired girl who brought food yesterday. Another girl was whispering viciously in her ear. Charlotte was coming down the stairs, carrying a bag. Two girls were standing behind her and discussing something. The guy in the chimera's body noticed Charlotte. The girls looked at each other and started laughing. A dark-haired girl walked up to the carpet that was laid on the stairs. The chimera guy was watching what was happening. A dark-haired girl was holding a carpet in her hands, and Charlotte was walking down the stairs. The chimera guy was looking at them. The girl began to smile maliciously. The guy in the body of a chimera thought that the girl really wants to dare the carpet, and at the same moment, he pulls the carpet towards himself. Charlotte's leg is giving way. Charlotte fell onto the stairs and began to roll down them, screaming. The chimera guy was looking at what was happening in fright. Charlotte manages to grab the railing of the stairs at the last moment. She was holding on to the railing and looking down at the stairs, shaking all over with fear. The chimera guy rushed towards Charlotte out of fright. Charlotte held onto the railing with her hand, and she put her other hand on the steps. She was scared. The chimera guy stopped near Charlotte and thought that everything ended well, and Charlotte was not injured. The chimera guy looked at the girls. They laughed and said that they were sorry because they wanted to clean the carpet and did not notice Charlotte passing by. Charlotte looked at the girls who were standing at the top of the stairs and discussing her. The chimera guy looked at the girls and thought that unless they would sincerely apologize with such a smile on their face, they deliberately did this to Charlotte. The girls looked around and said they were done with mopping the floors. Now they have to do the laundry. The chimera guy was watching them from the side. A lot of girls in maid costumes were running around the room. They were discussing that Lily would be back soon and everything should be cleaned up by her arrival. The dark-haired girl's name was Kelly, and all the girls began not to praise her for the case of the carpet and Charlotte. Kelly began to change and discuss Charlotte in a bad context. The chimera guy decided to find out why Kelly treats Charlotte so badly. The chimera guy looked at Kelly. Then he activated his status assessment ability. The chimera guy thought that, thanks to this skill, he managed to live in the forest for so long. The chimera guy looked at Kelly. Her characteristics appeared. She had the 5th level, was the Duke's maid, she was ungrateful, and also a traitor. The chimera guy looked at the laughing girls. The chimera guy looked at the girls. Tables with their characteristics appeared above their heads. He thought that all the girls were ungrateful. It turns out that all the girls were villains, not Charlotte. The chimera guy looked away. One of the girls took out Charlotte's underwear and started mocking him. The girls started throwing Charlotte's underwear all over the room. The chimera guy looked at the girls and didn't understand why the girls were acting like children. Kelly picked up Charlotte's underwear and put it over a bucket of dirty water. There was a dirty mop in the bucket. Kelly held the laundry over the bucket and said that Charlotte could walk around in dirty laundry. The chimera guy watched in horror. The chimera guy was looking at Kelly. He rushed towards her. Kelly almost dropped Charlotte's laundry into a bucket of dirty water. The chimera guy crashed into Kelly's back at all speeds. Kelly started screaming from fright. She fell on another girl, and a bucket of dirty water tipped over. A bucket of dirty water overturned. The girls were holding boxes of dishes in their hands. They started screaming from fright. Kelly started screaming that she needed to get rid of the spider that appeared. She was standing over a wooden shelf with a vase on it, and the vase started to wobble. The vase fell off the shelf. It fell flat on Kelly. Kelly fell with the vase. The vase shattered. The surrounding girls screamed in fear and surprise. The Chimera guy was watching the girls. They were all lying on the floor. They were all full of dirt and dust. Garbage and broken dishes were scattered everywhere. The girls were covered in mud, coughing and complaining of pain. One of the girls was upside down, and her head was in a bucket. The girl who had her head in the bucket, it was Kelly. She was covered in mud. The girl next to her said that Kelly stinks. The Chimera guy left the room, and the girls who were there were crying. The Chimera guy looked at the girls and laughed. He thought that at least this way they might understand what Charlotte was like. After that, he feels the best of all. The Chimera guy opened his wings. He closed his eyes and thought a little. After a while, he opened his eyes, as an idea dawned on him. The Chimera guy looked at the girls and thought that it was all karma. He intends to punish everyone who offended Charlotte. Several girls were lying on the floor in different positions and moaning in pain. He thought about it and imagined Charlotte's crying face. The Chimera guy was flying around the room. Then he heard a voice that he had raised his level. This surprised him very much. A table with characteristics appeared in front of him. His name was Saikyou. He possessed the 13th level. He really raised his level. The Saikyou thought that karma was raising his level, but what kind of voice he heard, he would deal with it later. The CEO looked at the girls and thought that if he punished the people who offended Charlotte, then would he really raise his level? An older woman came into the room and started yelling at the girls. An older woman began giving orders to the girls to clean up everything before Lily arrived. The CEO thought he needed to find out who Lily was. The girls rushed out into the street. The CEO followed them. Saikyou found himself in the courtyard. There were several columns of girls. There were servants and girls who got engaged at the academy. The girls began to discuss Lily, who appeared on the horizon. Lily walked forward, and the other girls began to bow to her. The CEO watched suspiciously. All the girls looked at Lily and admired her. The CEO stood behind and began to make his way through the crowd to see what Lily looked like. CEO saw Lily, his mouth hanging open in surprise. Lily was standing there, smiling, and there was a faint shimmer coming from her. Lily walked next to the girls. They looked at each other and laughed. The CEO thought that Lily looks normal, and why is she being praised so much? They say that Charlotte offends Lily, but Lily looks very confident. The CEO began to look at Lily carefully. He decided to activate his ability and check her characteristics and status. An unusual flicker formed over Lily. When the CEO noticed this, he opened his mouth in very strong surprise. He did not understand what it could mean. The CEO looked at Lily, and a large chart with characteristics appeared above her. The CEO thought that Lily had too many evil titles. I sat down and read the characteristics and thought that Lily was worse than all the girls around her put together. She was ready to go to great lengths for the sake of power. For this, she dealt with her parents. Lily walked and smiled at the girls. CEO looked at the inscriptions and thought that Lily was behaving so simply, but she was such a villain, he did not understand what the essence of the skill meant. Bound power. Lily also had the skill of commanding feelings. It allowed her to control likes and dislikes. With the help of this skill, she attracts people to herself. But this is not a charm, since for others it is not displayed in the characteristics. The surrounding girls looked at Lily with admiration. The CEO thought he needed to upgrade his skills. The CEO glared at the admiring girls. Without thinking twice, the CEO spreads his wings and flies up, while he touched several girls and fell to the floor. He was flying up and thought that he would act according to the classics, namely to beat monsters. There were mountains and forests around Saikyou. Saikyou flew through the sky and looked around. He noticed several white animals on the ground. He looked at the animals and said that their levels were lower than his, so he should easily defeat them. Saikyou rushed down to the pack of animals. He began to attack them with fire, which he released through his mouth. The animals did not expect this. They came under fire and started screaming in fright. Saikyou found himself on the ground. There was one beast with two tails in front of him. He thought that his attack had not worked on this beast. Was he really the leaders of the pack? Saikyou activated his ability and saw the characteristics of the animal that stood in front of him. This beast had a 9th level. Saikyou thought that the beast was really strong. The next moment, the CEO decides to activate the freeze. The beast began to gradually become covered with ice, but after a while it freed itself. Ice fragments remained on its fur, and it rushed at Saikyou. Saikyou decides to activate another ability. A round blob of energy appeared at his mouth. The CEO directs a current discharge into the beast with the words that he is about to receive. The beast falls to the ground. Saikyou flew in the sky and then ended up in the bushes. Saikyou found himself in the bushes, hanging on the vines and looking at the beast. The beast was lying on the ground. It was all black from Seikyou's attack. The CEO began to cheerfully shout that he was glad that everything worked out. He even managed to calculate the force of the blow. The CEO was hanging on the vines. Someone's voice said that his level had increased. The CEO was happy. He looked at his stats and said that he was given more experience since he was able to defeat the whole pack at once. The CEO was in the vines. He fidgeted in them and said that everything was fine. He needed to keep pumping his skills at the same pace. After a while, the CEO began to grumble in his stomach. The sky began to darken above the tall towers. Flocks of birds were flying nearby. The CEO thought that he hadn't really eaten anything today. There was a cook and a maid in the large kitchen. The cook was preparing the food. Then he turned to the employee and said that he would be out for a while and Kelly should put the portions on plates. Kelly agreed. Seikyou was hiding outside the kitchen window. As soon as the cook left the kitchen, Seikyou was inside it. He fell to the ground and was glad that he had succeeded. The CEO's mouth was drooling. He noticed Keely, who was putting food on plates. He thought that where this maid was looking, she was the one who liked to offend Charlotte. Seikyou looked in the direction Kelly was looking, and she fixed her gaze directly on the cockroach trap. Without thinking twice, she went to the trap and picked it up. Then Kelly went to one of the plates and began shaking the trap over it. Kelly began to pull a large black cockroach out of the trap with a fork. He sat up in shock and opened his mouth wide. Kelly smiled maliciously and started saying that Charlotte deserved to be punished for making Lily cry. A large black cockroach fell out into a large white plate of food. As soon as it reached the food, a loud splash was heard. Kelly smiled maliciously and stirred the contents of a plate with a spoon, in which a large black cockroach was swimming. Without thinking twice, Seikyou took a large dirty saucepan into the sink and flew towards where Kelly was standing. Seikyou hovers over Kelly with a pot in his paws, and the next moment, the pot is on her head. She got scared and started screaming. Seikyou got angry. He started flying around Kelly and shouting that she should remember his result of today's leveling. Seikyou started attacking the pot with fire magic, while the pot was on Kelly's head. At the last one, the Seikyou does a somersault in the air and hits the bottom of the pan with his tail, which was on Keely's head. Keely falls to the floor and starts rolling on the floor. The head cook returned to the kitchen. He started looking around and shouting that he didn't understand what was going on here. The CEO notices the cook. Then he looked at the tray of food and thought that he should leave for now and take the tray with him. CEO rushed out of the kitchen. There was a tray of food on his head. When CEO ran away from the kitchen, he said that he had got food for Charlotte. At this time, everyone was waiting for food in the dining room. Lily turned to the side and said that the kitchen was too noisy today. Lily began to smile maliciously when she heard two girls talking behind her back that Lily was too good, so she was worried about everyone. Today, Charlotte insulted her again. She really is a bad person. Lily looked delighted. She thought that everyone loved her. It was really a real pleasure. And Charlotte, who was not even invited to the dining room, was probably choking on stale bread right now. At this time, Charlotte was eating food from a plate and enjoying its taste. The CEO was sitting next to her on the bed and eating a bun. The CEO thought that he was interested in the fate of that soup with a cockroach. Lily and the others started eating. Lily looked at the plate and said that tonight's dinner really looks amazing. Lily put a spoonful of food in her mouth and started chewing it. One of Charlotte's brothers was sitting next to Lily and looking at her. Lily pushed the empty spoon away from her face. She started looking down as something started hanging out of her mouth. She noticed it. She was very surprised by what was happening. Then she took the handkerchief in her hands and put it to her mouth. One of Charlotte's brothers asked Lily if she was okay. Lily spits out the leftover food into a handkerchief. Then she began to examine the contents, which turned out to be on the handkerchief. There was a large black cockroach. Upon seeing this, Lily's face was greatly distorted in horror. Her mouth was slightly open and stained with food. She was holding a handkerchief in her hands. Lily got up from her chair and threw a plate of food off the table. Her face was filled with anger. The others who were sitting at the table watched Lily's actions in surprise. Lily threw her chair back, and people around her started asking her if Lily was okay. One of the maids came up to the table and started screaming in fright. She saw a cockroach on the table. The second maid sat down next to Lily and began to calm her down. Lily covered her mouth with her hand, but after a while she began to feel sick. Everyone around her looked at her in horror. The maids began to run up to Lily and calm her down. The CEO was lying in bed. He had eaten too much. The next moment, he heard that his level had risen again. He was very surprised by this. Charlotte was sitting at the table reading a book. CEO got up on his paws and heard a voice that he had reached the 5th level and transformed from a chimera cub into a proto-chimera. The CEO jumped up and got that he had really been reborn. CEO jumped off the bed and ran to the mirror. He began to look at himself and think that he seemed to have transformed, but did not really change. A table with his characteristics appeared in front of the CEO, which he began to look at. The CEO considered his characteristics and thought that he was thrown back to the 1st level, but his characteristics have become much higher. Before the next evolution, he needs to reach the 25th level. The CEO imagined himself in different guises. He thought that the more often he evolves, the more his appearance will change. The CEO was considering the characteristics of the insect chimera. He thought that the skills themselves could be obtained for a joint venture. Seiyo was sitting on the floor and thinking, what else can I see? Another form of chimera. This is a berserker. This photon is losing its sanity. Seiyo thought about it and imagined that Lily might be attacked by a berserk chimera. He thought that he didn't want to evolve like that, as Charlotte might get hurt. The CEO looked at the characteristics. Then he caught her eyes on the floor and thought that he would like to evolve into a human, not a chimera. The next moment, the CEO notices one form, a chimera man. He reaches the 30th level and acquires human skills. CEO's mouth dropped open in surprise. The CEO was looking at a table with the characteristics that a human chimera can possess. When the CEO saw this, he was very surprised. Seio's face began to shine with joy, and he thought that he would be able to possess unreal strength and even more so become a human being. Then he would be able to protect Charlotte and also communicate with her. Seiyo only needs to get the skill of humanism. The CEO began to look at the table in order to find out how many joint ventures it would take to become a chemical man. Then the CEO starts shouting that he really would need 15,000 joint ventures for this. The CEO completely lay down on the floor. He got upset and said that how much would he need to save up such a number of joint ventures. CEO and Charlotte turned to the wooden door. They both heard someone approaching Charlotte's room outside the door. Charlotte ran up to the CEO and said that he needed to hide urgently. Charlotte took a blanket and covered the CEO with her head. The CEO did not like this situation. Her older brother came into Charlotte's room. He was wearing a uniform, and several strands of his hair hung down over his face. Charlotte stood in front of her brother and asked him why he had come to her room. Charlotte's brother angrily replied that he had no strong desire to stay in the room of a villainess like her. The CEO looked out from under the blanket and thought with displeasure that, well, then the older brother should immediately leave Charlotte's room. The older brother looked at Charlotte's desk and said that it was really the documents of the school board. Charlotte looked at the table and said with a smile on her face that this is what they are, she has to finish with them by tomorrow. Charlotte's brother raised his hand and looked away from her. Then he said with displeasure that Charlotte really continues to pretend to be an excellent student until she already understands that no one needs her. CEO's face became gloomy and angry. He thought that a hard-working girl like Charlotte has such an ungrateful brother. He probably thinks that he is a wonderful person. The CEO activated his ability and began to consider the characteristics of Charlotte and her older brother. The CEO thought that Charlotte was compared to her brother. A magnificent man is her older brother in charge of her talents. Charlotte's brother pointed his finger at the table and said that Charlotte should immediately give him this music box, which she had inherited from her mother. Charlotte, as soon as she heard his words, was very scared. The box was on the table next to the writing materials. Her face turned red. She opened her mouth and said plaintively that this box belonged to her. My brother held his hand in front of Charlotte and said that this information was not important to him. Lily needed this box. Maybe Charlotte wants to hear what happened to His Highness in the end. Charlotte's face was all red. She looked at her brother and nervously said that she did not understand what her brother meant by that. Charlotte's brother's face was badly distorted. He got angry and started shouting that Charlotte should shut up. She couldn't keep her fiancé close, and he got close to Lily. Because of this, she should give him her jewelry box. Charlotte's face was red, and beads of sweat appeared on it, and she replied that her brother was saying something incoherent. The CEO peeked out from under the blanket and looked at the guys with displeasure. Seio's face contorted, and he imagined Charlotte's older brother handing Lily her jewelry box, which she had inherited from her mother. The CEO thought that why such a bad person like Lily even exists. Charlotte's brother went to the table to pick up her jewelry box. Charlotte took his hand and tried to stop him. She said he could take anything, but not the jewelry box. Her brother held out his hand in front of Charlotte and viciously said that she should not touch him. Charlotte pulled back. Her brother was pointing his hand at her, in which magical energy began to accumulate. The CEO rushed forward. He opened his mouth and shouted that Charlotte should be careful. Charlotte's brother released a burst of energy into her. Charlotte covered herself with her hands and squeezed her eyes shut. The CEO crashed into the wall behind Charlotte. Charlotte held her hands in front of her face. She opened her eyes a little and thought that maybe nothing had hit her. Then she thought, startled, that she had heard the sound of a fall behind her. Charlotte turned around abruptly. She started shouting that it was really the CEO who had fallen. Charlotte's brother watched her actions in surprise. CEO used the invisibility skill. He kept holding on to the wall he crashed into. Charlotte sat down and started calling for the CEO. She couldn't find him. Charlotte's brother stood aside and did not understand what Charlotte was doing now. Seo began to gradually slide down. His blood stained the wall. Seo wondered if Charlotte's brother really wanted to cast such a powerful spell on his sister. Seo's eyes filled with anger. He opened his toothy mouth with the words that Charlotte's brother is a rare bad person. The next moment, Seo bites Charlotte's brother in the groin area, causing the brother to start screaming. Charlotte stared at her brother, writhing in pain. He jumped on the spot. The CEO began to close his jaw more and more. He thought that he was ready to eat Charlotte's brother. The CEO did not let go of Charlotte's brother. In addition to everything, he activated the Infinite Thunder ability, thereby releasing a current discharge into Charlotte's brother. Charlotte started screaming in fear as she watched what was happening. Liquids were leaking out of Charlotte's brother's nose and eyes, and he himself was all black from the discharge of the current, as well as smoke was coming from his mouth and bald head. The CEO spread his wings and flew off to the side where Charlotte was standing. She pulled back in fright when she saw her older brother's condition. Charlotte hovered over her brother and asked how he was feeling. He should stay put, as she intended to bring people here. Black smoke was coming out of Charlotte's brother's mouth. He did not answer her. Charlotte ran out of the room and started calling for help. The CEO puffed out his cheeks and thought that Charlotte shouldn't do this. After a while, several maids came to Charlotte's room to look at her brother's condition. The girls hovered over Charlotte's brother, who was all charred and lay motionless. The girls decided to move Charlotte's Borat to the infirmary. Charlotte nervously said that she would go with them and try to heal him with her magic. One of the girls pushed Charlotte and said that she should step aside and not interfere with them. Charlotte opened her mouth slightly from the blow and stepped aside. Charlotte stared at the wooden door closing in front of her. She folded her arms and said she was worried about her brother. The CEO looked at her and tearfully thought that Charlotte, after all that had happened, had enough sympathy. Seo looked nervously in front of him and thought that he needed to accumulate SP as soon as possible and become strong in order to continue to protect Charlotte. The toothy white beast was attacked by Seo. Seo struck at it and the skin of the animal began to burn. It fell to the ground. The CEO opened his wings and soared in the air. Smoke came out of his mouth, and he said that everything was going as planned. Today he needed to earn as many points as possible. Seo looked at the defeated beasts that had 2 tails each. Seo hummed a tune and decided to go further into the thicket of the forest. Seo approached the rock in which the cave was located. He said that most likely there must be something interesting in the cave. Seo opened his wings and cautiously flew into the cave. In the mouth of the cave, Seo saw a chest. He was very surprised and gradually began to approach it. The chest was made of wood and metal, and a keyhole was built into it. The CEO looked at the chest with excitement and wondered what could be hidden in this chest. The CEO kept his distance from the chest. Then hearts appeared in the CEO's eyes. He imagined a cartoon man standing next to the chest, and a crystal appeared above his head. The CEO thought that maybe this is a treasure chest. As it happens in the game, this is every guy's dream. A moment later, the CEO found himself at the chest. He began kissing the chest and shouting that he really wanted to open the chest, as it was very interesting what was there. Seo leaned his paws against the keyhole that was on the chest and began to scratch it with his claws. Then he thought that if there were gems like that, then he would give them to Charlotte. After a moment, the chest begins to spin and throws Seo aside. He did not expect this and flew to the side, screaming a little. In the air, Seo turned around and landed on his 4 paws. He began to look at the chest warily, as he did not understand that this had just happened. The chest abruptly stopped in place. The CEO decides to activate his ability, and a table with characteristics appears next to the chest. It turned out to be a mimic monster that has the 8th level. Several paws burst out of the chest, and white eyes appeared. The CEO began to smile maliciously and look at the monster. Then he said that he intended to take everything that is inside this monster. The CEO flies up into the air with his paw outstretched. CEO heads towards the monster to strike at it, but it misses. The monster disappears from the CEO's view. Then the monster appears behind CEO's back and strikes at him. CEO is very surprised by the unexpected act of the monster. CEO, from the monster's blow, flies to the side with his back to the bottom and screams a little in pain. The monster turns away from the CEO. CEO is very angry. He hangs in the air and looks at the monster. Then he begins to accumulate energy in his mouth to make another attack. CEO hovers in front of the monster in the air. He closes his eyes and makes an attack with the words that the monster must burn in hellfire. In the next moment, CEO rushes towards the monster and spews a cloud of flame from his mouth, which swept past the monster. The monster manages to dodge CEO's attack. CEO continues to fly towards the monster and shout that the monster is acting honestly. Without thinking twice, CEO begins to accumulate magical energy in his body to make another lightning attack. The current discharge went straight into the monster that was standing not far from the CEO. The monster was unharmed after the lightning attack. His eyes were evil. They stuck out of the darkness of the open chest. Beads of sweat appeared on the CEO's face. He nervously shouted that his attack had really not worked. This could not be. The monster headed towards CEO to make its attack. The monster stretches out its sharp paw towards CEO and strikes at him. CEO was injured, and also because of the attack he was thrown into the wall, he screamed in pain. CEO slid to the ground from the wall. A terrible shadow of a monster was coming at him, and he panicked and thought that his business had become very bad. Sweat trickled down CEO's face. He was shaking with fear when the monster was coming at him. The monster loomed over the CEO. He raised one of his paws, which was aimed at CEO. The monster rushed with all its weight to the side where CEO was, but CEO manages to push off the ground and slip between the monster's legs. CEO rushed towards the exit of their cave, from which the lush crowns of trees and mountains could be seen. He stopped abruptly and thought that the monster needed to be lured here. The monster noticed that the CEO was missing. He abruptly turns around and rushes towards where the CEO is standing. The CEO ends up riding the monster. CEO and the monster continue to fight. The monster starts to run away in fright, being chased from the air by the CEO. There is a bright flash of light in front of the monster. The monster looks at it in fright. The next moment, a huge explosion occurs, and various fragments appear in the air. The CEO is floating in the air. He's trying to catch his breath. Then he looked down and saw that the monster was lying on the ground, and its insides were scattered on the ground. The CEO said that the monster really didn't have anything valuable inside. The CEO was floating in the air. From what he saw, he began to resent and plaintively say that he had tried so hard, he wanted so much to give Charlotte any kind of jewelry. The next moment, CEO freezes in the air. He cringes in pain. He closes his eyes and clenches his teeth hard. CEO found himself on the ground in a cave. He began to reflect, lying on the ground, that now he needed to take a break. Lying down, the CEO began to look at his table with characteristics and thought that he had only got 100 SP and the first level. In the fight against this monster, it really is no good. The CEO put his head on his paws and closed his eyes. The next moment, CEO is very scared as he felt that someone strange and frightening appeared behind him. Sweat trickled down the CEO's face. He hesitantly began to turn back, during which he thought that he felt someone very strong behind him. He would have sat down all wounded. He stood up a little. His mouth opened wide in fear, and he thought that he needed to figure out what to do next, since if it was an attacking-type monster, he wouldn't have long left. But what would happen to Charlotte in that case? CEO saw someone's face in the dark. His tongue was sticking out of his mouth, and the creature began to say that he thought, what a cute cutie monster. He really wanted to eat him. The CEO opened his eyes and mouth even wider. He was very scared. Then he thought that he did not understand what kind of creature was in front of him now. An incomprehensible creature that turned out to be next to the CEO began to pull his hand towards him, then lick his lips, and as a result, the creature said that maybe something happened to the CEO. Otherwise, he has such a surprised face now. Sweat was running down the CEO's face. He opened his eyes very wide in his toothy mouth. He could not understand in any way who was in front of him now. A muscular woman with short hair stood in front of the CEO. Her eyes began to burn brightly. CEO thought that it was really a gorilla monster in front of him now. The girl spread her arms and pouted. The muscular woman's eyes sparkled brightly, and she began to chase after the CEO. Tears appeared in CEO's eyes. He turned around and started running away, shouting that he did not understand what kind of monster was in front of him. A muscular woman grabbed Saikyou. She started hugging him, saying that it was the embrace of Venus. The woman hugged Saikyou with such force that his eyes began to roll up and drool flowed from his open mouth. The woman held the Saikyou in her arms. He said with his last breath that he had had enough. He was already injured. He could not move, and he would no longer dare to be rude to this highly respected woman. The woman looked at the CEO with a smile on her face. A muscular woman was sitting on the ground and holding Saikyou in her arms. She was looking at him with a smile on her face. Saikyou looked at the woman and thought that she hadn't done anything wrong to him. She definitely wouldn't deal with him. The CEO activated his ability, and the characteristics of this woman appeared in front of him. Her name was Love. She was a 64th level person. Love had the ability to read minds. The girl pointed her hands in the direction where Saikyou was standing. Then she said that Saikyou should not move, since he was seriously injured. The wound on Seiyo's body began to heal with the help of Love's magic. Love continued to sit on her lap. She held the Saikyou in her hands. Saikyou looked at her in surprise and thought that he was very lucky. She only looks fierce. Then Love started hugging Saikyou tightly. The Saikyou tensed up and said that he was sorry for offending the girl. Love abruptly asked if the CEO was a friend of Lady Charlotte. The CEO was very surprised and wondered how Love could have found out. Love remembered Saikyou's scared face and said that in the cave he was thinking about Charlotte. She read his thoughts with the help of her skills. Love's face turned red. She closed her eyes and pouted her lips. Then she said her name was Love and she was a cardinal of the church. The CEO was very surprised by the words about the cardinal. Love introduced several praying people and said that the cardinal is the highest clergyman in their parish. Their religion is based on faith in God, and she is quite a great person in the church hierarchy. Love held the CEO in her arms, and with a smile on her face said that if the CEO could tell how Charlotte was doing, Love was wondering how she was feeling. CEO looked thoughtfully at Love's smiling face and thought that he needed to tell the truth, since Love did not look like a villain at all, only she was a little strange. The CEO opened his toothy mouth and started telling Love everything. The CEO stood on the ground and told Love everything. She sat on the ground in front of the CEO. The guys looked at the sky through the crowns of fluffy trees. Clouds were floating across the sky. Then Love said that something like this had really happened, which was told by the CEO. Love closed her eyes and said that she would like to protect Charlotte, but it was problematic for her. The CEO was surprised by Love's words. Love began to tell that an agreement had been made between the church and the royal court not to interfere in each other's affairs. Her selfish actions could disrupt the order in the country. The CEO sat next to him and agreed with Love's words. Love put her hand to her face and looked at Saikyou thoughtfully. The CEO was sitting in front of her with his head down. Love closed her eyes and sighed heavily. Then she said that Lady Charlotte is one of the devoted followers of the goddess religion. Love can't just leave Charlotte. Love started stroking Saikyou's head and said with a smile on her face that she would at least try to help Saikyou and Charlotte. A blush appeared on the CEO's face. He looked at Love enthusiastically and thought that she was really telling the truth. Saikyou walked up to Love and started hugging her, his tail. From joy, I was running in different directions. Love said with a smile on her face that this was really how the CEO thanked her. The guys were in the middle of the forest. The guys were among the thick trunks of trees. Love said that maybe the CEO wanted to accompany her to the city since she was walking through the woods and got lost. The CEO thought that of course he would accompany this lovely madam to the city. The next moment, Saikyou was in Love's arms. She put his muzzle to her lips and said that she was grateful for his help. The CEO was very surprised by Love's action. A lot of people were walking along one of the wide streets of the city, and this building was surrounded by tall stone buildings. Love said they had arrived at the scene. Love was standing on the stone floor. She raised her arms, and the CEO was sitting on Love's shoulder. Love smiled and said that the CEO really saved her. The CEO became invisible and appeared in the air. His muzzle looked displeased. Love taught me how to blow kisses to the CEO and say that she sends the CEO a goodbye kiss. Sat, hovering in the air, he looked thoughtfully to the side. At this time, Love said that why did the CEO start to shy away from her kisses? Saikyou was invisible. He spread his wings and headed forward. He thought he had not seen this building before. The CEO was floating in the air and watching the girls who were wearing the academy uniform. The CEO thought that the girls were wearing the same uniform that Charlotte was wearing, so this building is the academy where Charlotte studies. Saikyou flew next to the windows of the academy, where girls walked and laughed. Saikyou wondered if he would find Charlotte here. If she was being bullied, then he would definitely step in and protect her. A strange picture was reflected in the CEO's eyes. A man loomed over a girl who was lying on the tiled floor in the hallway of the academy. The CEO stopped abruptly and began to peer out the window. The CEO was wondering what was going on down there. The girl was lying on the floor without moving. The girl who was lying on the floor was Charlotte. She was lying with her eyes closed. A man loomed over her with an evil smile on his face, just as a man was tying a rope around Charlotte's neck. Seikyou opened his mouth wide in fright and headed for the window. He wondered if it was really Charlotte, what this guy was planning to do. Events are being moved back 30 minutes. Charlotte was sitting in one of the rooms of the academy building. A dark-haired guy was standing next to her. Charlotte asked him that he was really an Aster. He agreed to Charlotte's question. Charlotte looked at Aster in surprise, who poured tea into mugs, and began to say that young Lady Lily and Prince Richard wanted to try on Charlotte. It seems that Charlotte's wish is gradually beginning to come true. Aster handed a saucer with a cup of tea to Charlotte. She said that when Aster became Lily's personal butler, he did not forget about her. She was really grateful to him. Charlotte brought the cup to her mouth and sniffed it. Aster was glaring at her. Aster began to remember how Charlotte used to praise him when she drank his tea. He stood next to her and began to think enthusiastically that the young lady had drunk his tea today. Aster recalled that, although he was an orphan, Charlotte communicated with him on equal terms. He was ready to do anything for her. Then Charlotte turned away from Aster and ran to Richard, who called her. This moment really offended Aster. Aster clenched his hand into a fist as he looked at Charlotte having fun, surrounded by Richard and other people. Aster put his hand on his chest and thought that despite his efforts, Charlotte would still choose Richard, since he was just a commoner. Lily watched Aster's sad expression. She peeked around the corner of the building, and then her face distorted. She began to grin angrily. After a while, Lily met Aster. Then she began to tell him with a smile on her face that he had beautiful black hair. Aster was holding a tray with cups and a teapot on it. He looked at Lily and thought that she seemed to have recently been adopted. Lily looked at Aster in surprise and said that maybe something had happened to him. Aster replied to her that he was a little surprised since it was the first time someone had praised his hair. Lily leaned her arms against her chest and with a smile on her face said that this could not be true. His hair was really very beautiful. It looked like silk. After Lily's words, Aster's face turned red. He was surprised by Lily's words. He thought that Lady Lily was the first to compliment his unsightly black hair. Aster started talking to Lily. He thought that Charlotte had never complimented his hair, and Mrs. Lily, every time she sees him, begins to praise and communicate with him on equal terms. Her look is not like Charlotte's. After a while, Aster was walking down the street and saw Lily sitting on a bench and crying. Aster approached Lily and said that he was interested in the reason for her tears. Aster froze in shock when he heard the words of Lily, who was streaming tears with her hands. That Charlotte had told her that a former commoner like Lily should not wander around the mansion so carelessly. Aster's eyes were full of horror. He reached out to the crying Lily and thought that why Charlotte did not respond to her feelings. Was it really normal? Aster tried to calm the crying Lily. Aster's face was full of horror. He remembered Charlotte smiling, and behind her an evil, laughing shadow. He thought that Charlotte was mocking him, and behind his back he would never clear her for this act. Charlotte's cup was empty. She had drunk all the tea. Aster hovered over the sleeping Charlotte and began to viciously say that Charlotte was mocking not only him, but also Lily. If Charlotte disappeared completely, then everyone would only get better. The next moment, there was a loud bang outside the door in the room where the guys were. Aster froze in place from fright, beads of sweat running down his face. Aster starts to turn towards the door to find out what kind of noise he heard. As soon as he turned around, a flaming blob flew straight at him. The fiery ball hit Aster right in the face. He began to fall back and make strange noises. The CEO rushed towards him and told him what Aster had planned and was going to do with Charlotte. Then the CEO bangs his head against Aster's head. Aster ends up on the floor. The CEO sits on top of him and punches him while he started shouting that Aster should get for all his misdeeds. Aster's face was swollen and bruised. The CEO turned to Charlotte and asked if she was okay. The CEO was angry. He clenched his paws into fists. He ran up to Charlotte, who was unconscious, and said that she was fine. Everything was fine. Seikyou returned to Aster. Then he activated his ability and saw the characteristics of Aster. He was a man who had the 23rd level. He was also one of the servants of the mansion. The CEO put his clawed paw on Aster's head, sat down and began to say viciously that now Aster would see karma. sat down to clean Astor's fifth point so that he could stay alive. Meanwhile, beautiful dresses and jewelry were floating in the air. Various people were telling Lily that these dresses and jewelry were their gifts for Lily. Lily was surrounded by young people who praised her and agreed with her every word. Lily put her hand aside and, with a smile on her face, began to say that next time others should donate to those in need. Lily started rolling her eyes in pleasure. Not her face was all red, but there were people standing behind her who couldn't stop admiring her. This gave Lily a special pleasure. Lily put her hand to her face, which twisted into a malicious smile. She thought that as soon as she returned home, she would have to tinker with Astaire a little. She was lucky that she snatched him as a personal butler. One of the guys came up to Lily and said that, why were people crowding at the gates of Lily's mansion? Lily stared in surprise at the gates of the mansion and the people who crowded around them. Several people started to turn back. Lily walked through the crowd to the gate of the mansion. People were discussing that they couldn't believe that the Hybel family mansion practiced such harsh punishments for servants. It was really terrible. Lily looked thoughtfully at the gate and did not understand what was going on here. The rays of light began to dazzle her. Lily lifted her head higher into the sunlight. Lily first saw a bouquet of flowers, and then Astaire's bruised and swollen face. Then she saw the Astor completely. He was hanging upside down on the gate, and his fifth point was covered with a bouquet of flowers. Charlotte puts her hands to her face and starts screaming Astor's name. She saw him and lied in horror. Next to Lily were young guys who also studied at the academy. They also fell into horror as soon as they saw Astaire. Meanwhile, the CEO was in the room where Charlotte was unconscious. He looked out the window and said with a laugh that Astaire had already become an urban celebrity. Now he would not even think about Charlotte. It was good that she remained unharmed. Charlotte was in a dream. She began to cry sharply and pronounce names such as Mr. Richard, her friends. Peace finally happened. The CEO listened attentively and looked at Charlotte. The CEO approached Charlotte. He put his head on her hand and plaintively said that Charlotte was a young lady. Charlotte was lying unconscious on the floor to the limit, but she had already stopped crying. The CEO imagined Charlotte being tied up with a rope. Then he thought that the CEO was acting frivolously. He could not think that others could encroach on Charlotte's life. Everything turned out to be much more serious than he thought. The CEO made a serious expression. He looked ahead and said that he needed to come up with something. The CEO also introduced Charlotte, who joined her hands together and began to pray. She raised her head high. Tears flowed from her eyes. Love was standing in a large hallway with an elderly man. They were not far from a huge window. Love said that His Highness had been in a coma for a year. The elderly man replied that he had no evidence. Love imagined the faces of the men with the castle behind them. Love put her hand to her face and said that Prince Richard and Chancellor Aurelia are now running the country. The man looked up at Love. He began to say with a smile on his face that Love was right and these events helped open canteens for the poor. A little more, and such actions would leave no money in the treasury. Love furrowed her brows and said that although Prince Richard was in power, Miss Lily was giving him these tips. Love imagined Lily's appearance and thought that the CEO had said that Love needed to look at Lily. She was not who she claimed to be. Love put her hand to her face and looked away. Then she timidly said that the more she learns about Miss Lily, the more she annoys her. The man replied that Lily had been placed in the care of the Hybel family by order of the Chancellor. As soon as Lily heard the older man's words, she abruptly started looking at him. Her lips were pouting, and she was very surprised. The next moment, Love starts hugging an older man, saying that he shared very important information with her, for which she is very grateful to him. From the strong embrace, the man's eyes began to roll up. The events are transferred to Charlotte's house. An alley was built on the street in front of the mansion, on which there were benches. Charlotte was sitting at a table with books and a carved lamp on it. There was a large painting in front of the table. CEO was lying on the floor behind Charlotte and thought he was doing everything in his power to protect Charlotte. He sat down angrily and remembered how Charlotte had followed Astaire. His face was bruised. Charlotte asked Astaire why he was leaving the mansion. Astaire turned around and said that Charlotte should stop pretending. The CEO turned away from Charlotte and began to think that Astaire took out his anger on her and left, clearly decided to follow Charlotte so that no one would offend anymore. Because of this, he could not leave to raise the level of the joint venture. Charlotte stared straight ahead, her gaze blank. The CEO turned to Charlotte and thought that if he could talk, he would explain to Charlotte who Lily really was. Seo was surprised when he heard the sound of footsteps outside the door. Charlotte jerked violently at the harsh noise. A young guy in a suit entered the room. He immediately started shouting that Charlotte had really gone back to her old ways. Seo looked at the guy in surprise. He had not seen him before. Charlotte got tired of the table and asked what they wanted from her. Someone else came into the room with the young man. The guy got close to Charlotte's face and started shouting that Charlotte should stop pretending as she started insulting Lily again. Charlotte replied that it was a lie as she hadn't even seen Lily today. Several people who came in with the young guy started saying that Charlotte should stop looking for excuses. They are disappointed in her. His Highness can only sympathize since Charlotte is his fiancée. The CEO activated the invisibility ability. He watched the actions of the guys and thought that he did not understand who they were. The CEO activates his ability, and a table with his characteristics appears above Prince Richard. He possessed the 10th level. The CEO thought he was surprised by such even statistics. Charlotte looked in front of her. She said that Prince Richard really loves Lily more than her. Richard replied that Charlotte was right. Charlotte's face darkened after hearing the words. Richard stood next to Charlotte and started shouting that their engagement to Charlotte was a mistake. It would soon be annulled, and then Lily would become his real bride. Charlotte stood silently and listened to Richard's words. Charlotte started up as soon as she heard Richard's words that if she did not want to be accused of treason, she should immediately bow her head and apologize to the future Queen Lily. The CEO became very angry as soon as he heard Richard's words. Seo opened his mouth and began to accumulate magical energy in his mouth. Charlotte broke the silence. She said that she also has pride. Why should she apologize for something she didn't do? Everyone in the room was greatly surprised by Charlotte's words. The CEO watched the process warily. Charlotte's gaze was lost. Richard's face began to change. He became angry and said that Charlotte should repeat her words and, in general, he is the crown prince. Then Richard abruptly raises his hand above himself. He began to swing at Charlotte and shout that Charlotte did not dare to insult him. Richard grabs Charlotte by her uniform with his other hand, and Charlotte opens her mouth in fright. CEO joins his hands together and sticks his claws into Richard's 5th point with all his might. In surprise and pain, Richard spreads his arms to the sides, then he begins to writhe in pain. CEO then activates his ability and applies an electric shock to Richard. Sparks start coming from Richard. The guys accompanying him stand aside in fright and start shouting Richard's name. Charlotte stands still and doesn't move. The CEO is standing next to him and is happy about what happened. Richard's escorts took him by the arms and dragged him to the infirmary. The CEO turns around and walks away thinking that he didn't even try. Charlotte held her hands together and stood still. She broke the silence and said that what happened to Richard was done by the CEO. The CEO was surprised and started to turn to Charlotte. Charlotte went on to say that the case with her older brother, after all, was also his doing. She noticed that lately the people around her are often traumatized. Charlotte looked at the CEO. She continued to say that whatever the reason, the punishment is absenteeism. The CEO became nervous, he was embarrassed, and gradually began to move towards Charlotte. The CEO was a little scared when Charlotte came up to him and picked him up. He already squeezed his eyes shut. The CEO opened his eyes, but did not look at Charlotte. Charlotte held the CEO in front of her and said that maybe what she was about to say might sound selfish on her part. The CEO looked timidly at Charlotte and waited for her to say next. Charlotte's face broke into a smile. She began to say that the happiness of the fact that the CEO protected her turns pain from suffering people. Tears began to appear on the CEO's face. The CEO started calling Charlotte. Charlotte put the CEO down on the floor and said that she would never meet a goddess like her. The CEO sat on the floor in surprise and looked at Charlotte. Charlotte ended up on the floor. She was not lying in duffel bags. The CEO was sitting next to her and began to call Charlotte's name restlessly. The action takes place in the main character's room. The chimera cub is swarming on his mistress's blanket. He carefully calls the young lady, but she does not answer him, so the kid decides that the sick girl is very ill. The animal uses its scanning ability. He analyzes the condition of the main character and realizes that Charlotte is infected with a serious illness. This disease is called descol. It is a rare and slowly progressive disease, similar to the flu. It is transmitted by airborne droplets or through saliva. The little chimera is surprised and exclaims in horror that the girl may die from the disease without waking up. The little hero thinks about it and remembers that the only currently known cure for this unpleasant infection is a very rare plant called mandrake root. He alone can alleviate the serious condition of the patient. The chimera cub busily walks along the bookshelf and comes up with something. With his small, clawed paws, he takes out one of the thick books and says that it should contain the information that he needs so much. The animal opens it on the right page and notes that the language comprehension skill left over from a previous life will be very useful to him. He says that all that remains in the book is to find the right picture, and most of the work will be done. He finds the drawing and pokes at it with his paw, glad that he has found what a mandrake looks like. A reborn teenager reads and learns that this plant grows on the blood of monsters. He concludes that the plant is located where there are many remains. The devoted animal turns to his savior and friend. He asks the main character to wait a bit. Remembering how kind she has been to him all this time, the grateful chimera cub promises that he will quickly find everything and return to her again. The action moves to the village streets. A woman wants to go to one of the abandoned houses, but a crowd of people dissuades her. They say that an exemplary family used to live here, but someone killed the girl's parents and the daughter ended up in a shelter. Villagers say that the girl did nothing but insult the hard workers, scolding their work. It seems that her mere existence made everyone in the settlement sick. The girl's neighbor admits that they were glad to take her to a shelter and not suffer anymore. The lady listens attentively to them and notes for herself that she came to Lily's native village only to help the baby and Lady Charlotte. But the woman does not like the situation more and more by the second. She decides to inspect the house. The aunt of the main character, named Venus, opens the front door to Lily's house to inspect it. The lady goes inside in order to learn something from the residual memories that always remain in such unusual places where someone died. She puts her palm against the plank floor covering the whole house. On the floor, despite the fact that some time has passed since the death of the parents, there are still traces of blood left by the killer exactly a year ago at the crime scene. The woman sees a terrible picture that defies logical explanation, the actions of which took place some time ago. Lily's wounded father lay on the floor and begged his daughter to stop the atrocities and leave her mother alone. The girl does not stop and tightly clutches a kitchen knife in her hand, using it as a weapon for mutilation. Her glassy eyes are full of rage and madness. The mother's exhausted hand falls dully to the floor and no longer rises. The lady is horrified. She asks herself what she just saw. A woman can't believe that a girl would do this to her parents with her own hands. She realizes that Lily got rid of the evidence a long time ago, and no one will believe her without proof. Venus frowns and says that this is no longer a simple hobby of a child. She stumbled upon a serious case quite by accident. She understands that no one will believe her without solid evidence, so in order to convict Lily, she needs to prepare carefully. Meanwhile, the animal is flying through the dense forest. He grumbles that he has not been able to find a mandrake for a long time, although he bought the skills Improved Sense of Smell and Scent Search specifically for this. The baby was already beginning to feel sick from the unpleasant smell of animals. The baby chimera, one by one, goes through all the plants that come in his way in search of the cherished root, and suddenly his gaze falls on one of the familiar-looking leaves. This is exactly the image he saw in the book he had viewed earlier. He looks closely at the plant and makes sure that it is exactly the plant that he is looking for so hard. The hero is incredibly happy that after so much time, he discovered the cherished mandrake root, which can cure the main character of the disease. He grabs the leaves of the plant with his small, sharp teeth and tries to pull the fruit out of the ground. The hero is so keen on this activity that he does not notice how someone is slowly approaching him from behind, casting his shadow on the animal. Unexpectedly for the hero, some kind of beast throws a small chimera with all its might with its powerful paw. The impact is so strong that he flies away from the place where he was sitting. The hero does not let the mandrake root out of his teeth, so the plant is also pulled out. After flying some distance, the animal falls to the ground. He realizes that his opponent's blow broke his wings. Thus, he lost the ability to fly. The beast, which looks like a saber-toothed bear with horns, is slowly approaching him. The chimera cub's eyes widen when he sees such a decisive attack, and he curses inwardly, asking himself if this unknown beast is really the keeper of this rare plant that the baby pulled out a couple of seconds ago. He scans the enemy and realizes that he belongs to the race of huge bears and has very good abilities and health. The kid grabs a mandrake root in his teeth and runs away from the bear with all his might, realizing that he will not be able to cope with him in a fight. Now, the main goal for him is to deliver medicine to his mistress, which will help her recover as quickly as possible. He clenches the plant in his teeth with all his might and repeats to himself that he should never let go of the mandrake root because he will most likely not find another one, or he will lose too much time and it will be too late. Meanwhile, the bear catches up with him and gives the fugitive a new, even stronger and more lashing blow. The little hero flies up into the air again from such a slap on the head. He realizes that he did not notice how he ended up on the edge of the cliff. The kid does not have time to slow down, and by inertia flies off the cliff straight into a deep gorge. The brave cub spins in uncontrolled flight, falling in a stream of air and unable to soar into the sky due to previously injured wings. A huge bear is hovering on the edge of a cliff, watching as the animal flies rapidly down the cliff. He seems to have completed his task. The animal remembers Lady Charlotte and exclaims, mentally addressing her. He watches with indescribable horror the approaching rocks and the mountain river flowing at the very bottom of the gorge. The kid decides that he will fight to the end. Meanwhile, the action moves back to the shelter. The open window in the poor room of the main character makes plaintive creaks, swaying in the wind. The orphanage dislikes the girl so much that they gave her the worst room. Suddenly, a small, bloody paw appears on the windowsill. The animal clings to him with its small and incredibly sharp claws. The baby's torso appears behind the paw. He grabs the wooden windowsill and, holding a mandrake root in his teeth, waddles into the main character's room. He slowly rearranges his legs, but purposefully walks towards Lady Charlotte to help her. The brave animal proudly turns to the girl and, opening his swollen eyes, says that he has obtained a healing mandrake root for her. The kid, who has made such a difficult journey, looks around the room and is horrified. It's empty. He calls his mistress, but the girl's empty bed is straightened out. The room is in a mess, as if someone hurriedly dropped the furniture and pulled the main character out of it. The aunt of the main character with an animal on her shoulder runs headlong to help her niece. He and the hero imagine how a girl weighs on thorn branches and is mistreated by her. She urgently needs to be rescued. 3 days earlier, Charlotte, sick and exhausted by her illness, lies on the bed and breathes heavily, parting her parched lips. She groans and coughs all the time. The condition of the main character is clearly not the best. She opens her eyelids with difficulty and looks around the empty room with her eyes watering from the intense heat. She's very ill and needs someone who will constantly be on duty next to the girl. This is usually handled by a small CEO. The girl calls her ward, but no one responds to her voice. Charlotte gets up and sits on the bed. She starts coughing again. The girl addresses the chimera cub, calling him Saikyou, and says that they are alone in the room. The heroine asks why he became invisible in this case, but there is no answer. The girl calls the animal again, this time less confidently. Turning her head, Charlotte notices an open book on the floor. The main character is surprised that the book was left in this form near her bed. The girl looks at the open page with the interest that is only possible with her condition. The book turns out to be an encyclopedia of medicinal herbs. A puzzle is forming in the head of the main character, and she understands what her little friend is doing right now. The young lady vaguely remembers how the chimera cub studied book entries and ran around the room while the girl was lying in bed, in a semi-conscious state. She is very grateful to her friend for taking care of herself. Charlotte gets down from the bed and cautiously approaches the open book. She tremblingly smooths the corner of the book crumpled by the animal and is mentally touched by how strange this baby is. The main character replays in her head the moments when the chimera baby took care of her and brought delicious food to her room. He probably understood the position she was in, the girl thinks gratefully, who does not know such an attitude from anyone. Charlotte had noticed for a long time that the servants were secretly adding all sorts of rubbish to her food. The student council is also dumping all the dirty work on her. If the main character makes a mistake, she is immediately scolded and accused of all the sins of the world. However, despite all the hardships, Charlotte stubbornly told herself that you need to be a decent person and follow the voice of conscience. She believed that it was necessary to ignore evil and do good, but with the advent of Lily, her principles began to disappear. The main character shrinks into a ball, feeling humiliated and trampled. She is ashamed of her current condition and her relationship with others. These bitter thoughts only make her feel more and more painful every second. The girl's condition could be compared to an insensitive rag doll. In truth, she would have gladly turned into an insensitive toy, if not for one character who played a huge role in her current life. Without Saikyou, her existence would have lost all meaning. The main character was happy to see how the cute animal is angry at those who offend his girlfriend and patroness. During their acquaintance, the baby became her best friend and replaced the whole family. Charlotte sighs sadly, swallowing back tears. She was deeply touched by the kindness and care of the little chimera cub, realizing how much he had done for her. The main character turns towards the closed door and slightly puts out her hand. She makes a call, saying she wants to see EO. Instead of a small animal, a crowd of knights armed from head to toe breaks into the girl's room. They are clearly not in the most friendly way towards the main character and are not going to mess with her at all. The knights point their spears and pikes at her. The blade of one of the spears almost cut Charlotte, but she was able to recoil in time and avoid injury. They shout an order for her to stay put. They say that the girl betrayed her country. Charlotte looks at the knights with bewilderment and fear. The girl is trying to figure out why they broke into her place and what is going on. She asks them again in disbelief. Shouts are heard from everywhere, calling for the main character to be dealt with as soon as possible. The crowd of gawkers shouts that the girl is their enemy and represents evil itself. The onlookers crowding near the castle demand to tie her up as tightly as possible, thereby neutralizing the lady. Lily, watching this spectacle, claps her hand over her mouth and tries to make a sympathetic and noble expression on her face. She asks her sister how it happened. The girl says she has to tell her father about everything that happened. The hypocrite takes off and runs headlong down the corridor. The maid calls out to her, but she does not hear. She runs into one of the rooms and carefully closes the door behind her. A malicious smile slips across Mrs. Lily's face. She grins, grinning even more. The girl's face turns into a hideous grimace of triumph and malice. The insidious girl begins to laugh and rejoice that she managed to bring her idea to life. She remembers how she came to the fiancé of the main character, Richard, and lied to him that his beloved was cheating on him with another. He doesn't believe her at first. Lily manages to convince Prince Richard. She says that she personally was an unwitting witness to one of these scenes, during which Charlotte was not faithful to him. The young monarch curses and demands that the guards bring the main character to him so that he can look at the sinner with his own eyes. The traitor again makes an innocent appearance and asks the young man not to be cruel to the guilty young lady. He apologizes and replies that despite the fact that Lily asks him about it, the hero still will not be able to cope with the pain and forgive this woman who humiliated him as a man. Richard takes off and walks off somewhere at a brisk pace. The girl seems to split in her mind. On the one hand, she regrets what happened and broadcasts it to everyone she sees. On the other hand, Lily mentally rejoices at how smoothly everything went and how easily it turned out to turn out the plan. The image of the main character appears in Lilia's head. The girl goes berserk when she remembers how much Charlotte is right and sweet. She is exasperated by the thought that she responds with good for evil. She's finished now, Lily decides. She remembers everything she stole from Charlotte. Astos, Rufus, and the prince are all good but useless, even though they managed to benefit from them in the end. Having stolen them from Charlotte, the girl wanted to shine. It's time for everything stolen to rot, she decides. Lilia wondered if she wasn't as kind and well-mannered as Charlotte, she wasn't destined to reach the top. The girl decided that she would not give up just like that. She once again remembered the main character and came to the conclusion that it was her fault. She also understood that there were no obstacles in her way. At this time, Charlotte, in tattered clothes, was shamefully taken out into the street in front of Lilia and the crowded townspeople. The girl laughed to herself and gloated over the main character. Lilia, who was making a terrible face again at the moment, laughed maliciously and cried out that now, when she got rid of her sister, she would really shine. The exhausted Saikyou kid barely climbs into the main character's room. He looks around and asks himself why the room is in such a mess. The chimera cub remembers exactly that he left the room clean. He realizes that something is wrong and whines plaintively from longing and foreboding. In desperation, the baby calls the main character, asking where she is, but there is no answer to his crying. He realizes that the young lady has disappeared. Pretending to be invisible, Saikyou enters the corridor and watches the servants. The maids are cleaning the mansion as usual. After analyzing this, the chimera cub comes to the conclusion that this is definitely not a robbery. He decides to test all hypotheses. The kid flies all over the mansion, even looks into the futon and onto the stairs, but he can't find his girlfriend in any way. He realizes that, being terminally ill and exhausted, Charlotte could hardly leave the room on her own. The animal thinks about it and remembers that during the search, he has never seen other members of this family. Strangely enough, there were only servants in the house. He wonders if they've taken the main character somewhere. One thought comes to the little hero's head, and he decides to check if the girl can be outside the castle all this time. The devoted chimera cub does not know where the main character is or where she can be found, but understands that he has absolutely no time for unnecessary thoughts. The kid takes off. All he asks is for the young lady to hold on. The animal has been looking for its owner for 3 days and 3 nights. He endures bad weather and hardships, but he still cannot find the slightest hint of a trace of the missing Charlotte. Exhausted and desperate, the hero trudges along the paved road. During these 3 days, the kid returns to the deserted mansion a couple of times to check if Charlotte or at least someone from the family has turned up there, but only the servants still went there. This further strengthened the confidence that the girl was in trouble. The brave animal thinks about it and realizes that he wants to find out at all costs how the young lady is. He is saddened by the fact that he cannot even find her, and realizes that he will never be able to cope with this task alone. Having lost all hope of saving the main character, the chimera cub whines in despair and longing. He feels completely helpless and with tears in his eyes asks someone to help him in a difficult moment. At the same moment, as if hearing the hero's pleas, a female voice is heard from behind the chimera cub, who calls out to him, calling him a baby. The animal turns around in surprise at the familiar sound. A woman looms over him from behind, the same lady, who is also the aunt of the main character, who broke into Lily's abandoned house, which used to belong to her deceased parents. A woman named Venus hugs the baby tightly, hugging him to her soft chest. The CEO would never confuse these familiar hugs with anything. The lady asks her friend what he is doing right in front of the church. The chimera cub asks in surprise what she means. The woman points her hand in the direction of the building majestically towering above the rest of the houses, and replies that this church belongs to her. At the moment, it's not so important, she says. She turns to the baby and tells him in a loud, angry voice that she searched for him. She says she went to the mansion a bunch of times, but never once heard a single thought of the chimera cub. The kid looks up at the lady plaintively. His big eyes fill with bitter tears again. He sadly addresses the woman, calling her sister, since by her status, she is a clergyman. She is surprised by this behavior of the baby and asks the helpless animal what happened to him. He replies that he will not be able to cope with the problem himself without her help. He says that he has not been able to find the young lady for 3 days, despite the fact that he is looking for her in all possible places where she might even be. The woman asks the baby to calm down and says that she's been looking for him all this time for this particular case. The lady looks at the CEO, who is comfortably ensconced in her arms. She says that all this time Lady Charlotte has been imprisoned in the capital's dungeon, and tomorrow she was sentenced to a cruel execution. The little creature's eyes widen. He assumed that trouble had happened to the main character, but he did not think that everything was so serious. In the head of the reborn young man, the image of the unfortunate heroine, pierced by the peaks of evil guards, immediately arises. The Holy Sister says that she's been out of town for several days, so she only found out about this news herself 2 days ago. She explains that by the time she returned, the fatal verdict had already been passed. The lady is accused of treason against her own kingdom. One thought appears in the little creature's head, but he cannot believe that this is the work of that disgusting girl who is the sister of the main character and the prince who used to be Charlotte's fiancé. The woman dispels his doubts, telling him that this is the work of Chancellor Aurelius. The CEO asks her who this chancellor is. The lady replies that he holds a very important position in this country, so to speak, and has great power. She suggests that because of the king's coma, no one can cope with the chancellor now. The Holy Sister says that she tried to insist on a commutation of the sentence, but he began to threaten her, asking if she really wanted to break the contract. She notes that she had no doubt that she would not be able to use the power of a cult or believers here. The baby calls out sympathetically and cautiously to the lady. He's amazed by the woman's story and considers her really brave, since she was not afraid to try to help the main character, even despite the restrictions due to her status. He couldn't have dreamed of more. Suddenly, a lady comes up with a brilliant idea. She screams and grabs the chimera baby, lifting it in front of her at arm's length. He finds himself suspended in the air and exclaims in surprise. The woman lifts him off the ground and examines him. She remembers that he is a monster for whom there are no barriers. The lady continues to hold the hero in her arms and says that he is the only one who can get Charlotte out of prison. She asks if the brave kid is ready to take such a risky step. There is a possibility that he will have to put his life on the line and make an enemy of the whole country in order to save the young lady who is so dear to his heart. Brave demon CEO remembers his girlfriend and the happy moments spent with her. He feels that he owes a debt to the main character, who gave him a name and took care of him in every possible way. The matter is urgent, so the hero decides everything very quickly. He selflessly shouts out that he is ready to sacrifice his life for Charlotte and decides that he will not stop in the face of even the most terrible danger. The woman encourages the brave little man, saying that his answer is just great. She advises her friend to fly to the aid of the main character as soon as possible, since he decided to save her from prison. The lady lets him go and tells the animal to fly without her for now. She promises that she will catch up with him as soon as she finishes with her accumulated affairs. The chimera cub looks at her in surprise, realizing what will happen to the status of a lady if she helps. The clergyman says that if he didn't lie about Lilia's skills, then the aunt of the main character will be able to use them against her same girl. The woman asks the baby not to worry about her once again and to fulfill his part of the plan. She looks proudly at the chimera cub and, wanting to give him even more strength and confidence, fervently asks him if he will definitely cope with such a difficult mission. Little Saikyou frowns his eyebrows and confidently replies that he will not let you down. The lady rejoices at his mood and points out the direction in which the royal capital is located. The monster rises into the sky. She shouts after him to fly and save the princess from the tower. Developing unprecedented speed, the little hero heads in the indicated direction towards the prison where his girlfriend is imprisoned. He closes his eyes slightly to gather his thoughts and strength. Everything that the reborn young man does is not just a way to thank the main character for her kindness. The little enemy remembers that when he saw how everyone turned away from Charlotte, he remembered himself in the past. A family photo captures a moment in the life of a little boy. It was his birthday that day, so there is a cake in front of the child. His happy parents are standing behind the baby, hugging his gift. Some time ago, a boy was fighting with another student. Watching this spectacle, the other child is very surprised by his agility and strength. School children are crowding around. After the end of the fight, they whisper among themselves, noting that the hero defeated the high school student. The kids thank him for his help, telling him that the grown-up guys bother them only because they are older. The boy tells them to call him again if they get into the same situation and someone bullies them. He promises to rush to help at the first call. One of the children says that with such strength as the hero, all the girls in the class will adore him. The hero turns around and says that he is just helping those who need help. He notes that there is nothing special about this at all. The boy shouts to his new acquaintances that they will see each other again. Evening comes on the street, and a bright moon lights up over the hero's house. The student carefully goes home, trying not to attract attention to himself. In the kitchen, the boy's mother is standing at the stove as usual and cooking something. Sensing the appearance of her son, who wanted to slip past her unnoticed into his room, the woman tells him to stop. She asks him if the boy understands what time it is on the clock. The mother turns to the hero and calls him to her. The child reluctantly and confusedly approaches his mother. He's shaking a little. The boy stops in front of the woman, looking down and feeling guilty for coming home late. Suddenly, he turns his head and notices a delicious dinner and a cake with candles on the table. The boy can't believe his eyes. Dad sneaks up behind the hero and congratulates him on his birthday. He hugs his son, and the boy feels that another creature is pressing against him from behind. Parents lean over their child and ask him who is late for his own birthday. The father, anticipating his son's delight, points to the hero's birthday present. The boy breaks into a smile, realizing what kind of creature was clinging to his shoulder. He thanks his father for the gift and immediately rushes to hug the black chimera animal. It's time to blow out the candles. Parents once again congratulate their baby on his birthday, feeling proud that he is growing up such a big and noble child. They say they are very glad that he was born to them, and the whole family sits down at the festive table to celebrate this significant event. After some time, the hero meets young children again, whom he protected from a bully. They call him Sensei. The boy waves to them and shouts, "See you later," heading to his home. He opens the door to his house and enters the apartment, saying that he has already returned. Suddenly, his attention is attracted by a man lying on the floor. This is the hero's father. The boy is terrified and calls for his dad, but he does not react, continuing to lie on the floor motionless. After a while, the son says that mom is working overtime again. He sighs heavily, looking at the note left for her, which says that it is possible to have a snack for today. The boy carries the food left by his mother to his father. He lies exhausted on the mattress, covered with a blanket. The father apologizes, saying that he made his son very worried about his condition. The student calms the man down. He says that everything is fine and reminds me that mom is also working hard to make him feel better as soon as possible. The boy says that his mother considers her work more fun and says that there is nothing to be done about it. He tells dad that she promised to take him to a restaurant tomorrow since the work is going so well. The child is happy at the prospect of going to such a chic institution, which even has an aquarium. He turns to his father and suggests that he go to this restaurant together when he gets better. The man is hopelessly silent for a while, and then sadly agrees and promises to go with his son to eat at a good place. One day, returning from school, the hero says goodbye to his little friends again. He waves to one of them and turns around at someone's hail. The boy sees his mother standing next to a car. He runs to her as fast as he can and shouts to his mother, saying that she arrived earlier today than usual. He stops in disbelief when he notices a tall man next to his mother, looking down at him. The stranger examines him and says that the boy really looks very much like his mother. She gently hugs her son and says that she has already moved their things to a new house. The boy continues to stand in complete disbelief, his eyes wide open and trying to figure out what is happening. The child is surprised to ask his mother who this strange and unfamiliar person is, and what other house she is talking about. He has no one else to turn to, so the student hopes that his mother will explain to him the essence and purpose of everything that is happening. She leans over to her son and happily says that this man will now live with them. The woman tells the boy that he will now have to call Mr. Hijeki, as the stranger was apparently called, Daddy. Mr. Hijeki agrees and tells the hero to call him that. He asks the child not to worry and promises that the boy will quickly get used to all the changes in the family. The boy looks up at the adults with his big and frightened eyes. He does not understand how it happened that now this man will replace his own and beloved father. Meanwhile, a pair of lovers loom over him, demanding that the child call Mr. Hijeki Daddy. Mom and her new husband look at him ominously and smile. The child does not recognize their faces, distorted into scary masks. Someone takes the child by the shoulders from behind. The boy turns around hopefully and sees that his sick father is standing behind him. Dad showed up on time and saved his son from the pressure of stupid adults. The boy's mother attacks the man, asking why he is not bedridden. He turns to his wife and wants to know what it all means. Mr. Hijeki intervenes in the conversation. He asks you to wait a minute and calm down. The parents don't stop bickering. The woman screams that she did not want to return because of her husband's attitude. They don't pay attention to the pleas to stop. An elderly passerby pays attention to the couple. A wizened old man comes closer and politely asks them to be quiet, reminding them that they swear in front of the child, which is very bad for his psyche. The mother does not pay attention to the older man's remark. She pushes her husband and shouts that he is already useless to the family. Weakened by illness, the man loses his balance and flies back, accidentally hitting the old man standing behind. They're flying down the stairs. A passerby lands unsuccessfully and hits his head on the stone steps. Everyone present is horrified by the realization of what they have done. The old man rolls down the stairs and remains lying on the ground without the slightest signs of life. The mother hides behind her boyfriend, who is afraid of being accused of murder himself, and says that the old man crashed. Meanwhile, the boy rushes to his father. He asks how he feels. The man replies that he is clearly better than the old man. The mother's boyfriend comes to his senses and, realizing what is about to happen, pushes the child away and grabs the man by the neck. He decides to pin all responsibility for the death of the old man on the sick father of the hero. The woman starts screaming and screaming for help with all her might. She accuses her husband of murder and asks passers-by to call the police. The mother grabs the boy and pulls him aside. The hero resists and shouts for them to stop because his dad didn't kill anyone, but he was hit by a woman and was the victim. He asks you not to approach him. People start fussing around. They wail and call the police. The child does not calm down and continues to scream that his father did not do this, but no one listens to him. The little kids he saved from a high school student are watching this spectacle in surprise. The hero can't calm down in any way and is still trying to reach adults. Some time passes and the action takes place in the classroom of the school where the boy studies. The little classmates look back at him and whisper to each other. They say it's not worth hanging out with him, otherwise he might kill them. They decide that there is no edge in this case, and the killer's son is very likely to follow in his father's footsteps. The hero hears this, and his whole body tenses up. He clenches his fists tightly. The boy can't help himself, and he rushes at one of his ungrateful classmates, whom he once defended from the attacks of adult children. A fight begins. Other children run out of the classroom to call for help from the teacher. After some time, a trial takes place at the school, during which the mother of the injured boy asks how the school allowed such an egregious case. The mother of the injured boy asks the principal of the school, where her son studies, when the parents of the student who attacked her offspring will arrive here. The gray-haired old man assures her that he called his parents, but he was interrupted and left a message. The message said that the boy's father was busy. He asked the school management to scold the child properly instead of him. The hero's classmate is whimpering in his mother's arms. She hugs him and glares at his abuser. The hero turns his eyes, burning with pain and rage, to the side. In the evening of the same day, his new father approaches the hero, who is sitting on the floor and doing his homework. He says he heard from his child's mother that the boy hit one of the children in the classroom today. The man looks down at him and contemptuously says that the one who strikes first is always the weakest person. The boy, without raising his head and staring at one point, asks him for forgiveness with a memorized phrase. The mother's lover loses his temper and throws him to the other side of the room. He stands over his stepson and tells him not to think it's violence. The man covers up his act by teaching a lesson to the hero. He turns away and returns to the kitchen, where he asks the boy's mother what she taught this tomboy. The woman looks at him and replies that how could she have known that her son was capable of such a thing? The child is thinking hard. He remembers his birthday and does not understand why he did it and at what point something went wrong. The number of unfamiliar family members began to increase dramatically, and classmates shunned him. Even mom has changed. The hero found shelter for himself inside the slide on the playground. He lies in it with his hands behind his head and looks at the clear sky above his head. The boy remembers that he needs to go home. He becomes sad and realizes that he absolutely does not want to go back to a cold and strange apartment in which every member of the family has become a stranger to him. Suddenly, someone's conversation reaches the hero's ear. One of the talking guys calls names and rudely demands that the person he is talking to look at himself. The child crawls to the edge of the railing and listens to the conversation. One of the speakers tells the girl standing in front of him that no one in the class likes her. Another abuser comments on the schoolgirl's face and asks why she is allowed to go to school in this form. One of the guys says that they will think about their attitude towards her if the girl gives them money. The hero calls out to them. The abuser looks up at him and asks who he is to interfere in their showdown. The boy clutches a stick in his hand and replies that he is just a boy who was nearby. He asks if the children really think that he will just turn away if they continue to behave like this with a girl. The children swear at the defender of the schoolgirl, but do not decide to come into conflict with the hero. They turn around and, throwing rude phrases at the student, go in the opposite direction. The hero watches as they quickly run away from this place, so as not to get what they deserve from him. He jumps to the ground in front of the girl. The baby looks at him with her clear, tear-stained eyes and thanks the brave defender for his help. The boy looks away and says he hates it all. He walks away towards the house and finally advises his new friend to avoid loneliness. The hero, frowning, stomps down the street. The next day, he meets a girl in the hallway of his school. Seeing yesterday's intercessor, the heroine gasps and, looking at him, shifts uncertainly from one foot to the other. The surprised hero hears the conversations of schoolchildren, who notice that the girl is walking in his company. The boy's presence saves her from more ridicule from other children. After the very day the hero protected her, she started following him around. Even after the boys grew up and became high school students, she stayed close to the young man. By then, he had already forgotten about the incident and returned to normal life. The young man had friends and, in general, improved relations with classmates. The reason for the changes was the girl who was always there. But time passed. The director asks the hero if he can fulfill his request. The old man asks to treat this as a favor. The young man asks why he insists that he turn to the heroine and ask her to go back to school. The teacher replies that he is always very sad to lose a student with good grades. The director asks if the girl is not the hero's childhood friend. He says that he turned to the young man for this reason, hoping that a close friend, with whom the girl has been communicating since childhood, would be able to influence her. The young man picks up the phone and writes her a message. He asked her why the girl was skipping school and said that her aunt was worried about her. Lately, the heroine has not been in touch with him. A colleague of the guy escorts a diner visitor. She asks the young man to clean up the tables that they will need. He replies that he understood her request and will do everything. At this moment, a group of young people comes to the door. The girl welcomes new visitors. A group of teenagers walks into the hall, and one of them makes a caustic comment about the order in the institution. The boys forgot to book a table, so no one prepared a clean place for them. The hero looks at them and immediately realizes that they are some kind of hooligans. One of the teenagers throws a bunch of trinkets on the table and brags about stealing them from the pharmacy. His friend thinks about it and says aloud whether he should try to steal things too. The hero turns to a familiar voice. One of the hooligans notices that it is very unexpected to hear such thoughts from a former excellent student. Another asks the girl why she went to this useless high school. He continues his speech, asking if she was going to college. At this moment, the main character's eyes widen in surprise. He sees his childhood friend in the company of bullies. She had changed a lot since their last meeting. The girl got a haircut, pierced her ears, and her look changed a lot. One of the heroine's companions asks her if she is sure that the guy from elementary school is her friend. He reminds the girl that the young man was trying to get her back to school. The heroine's look changes a lot when she meets the eyes of a guy. The bully sitting next to her notices this. He laughs and jokes. Is this hero watching her a stalker by any chance? He encourages the girl, saying that she will be fine, and asks her to forget about this strange guy. The bully leans towards the heroine and repeats that she should just forget about him. The hero, who hears all this conversation, is horrified by what he saw and heard. The girl heads towards the exit and waves goodbye to the departing guys. She goes up the stairs to the platform. Suddenly, the heroine comes face to face with her childhood friend, whom she has been so diligently avoiding lately. He looks at her and is silent. After a while, the hero speaks to her, touching on the topic that he has not seen the girl at school for a long time. He recalls that a friend said she would take the college entrance exams. The young man notes that the heroine's aunt is very worried about her niece and is afraid that something has happened to her. The girl lowers her eyes and sullenly tells him to shut up. The young man was even taken aback by this answer. She looks at him and says that a lot has changed since their first meeting. The young man does not take his tenacious gaze off her. He says he didn't think his girlfriend was really like that. He notices that the girl forces herself to adapt to others. The hero breaks down and shouts that if she continues to behave like this, she will eventually be alone again one day. The heroine opens her eyes wide and clenches her eyes wide and clenches her fists. She screams at the guy to shut up and pushes him with all her might. The hero flies right onto the railway tracks. He only manages to turn his head towards the blinding lights. The girl claps her hands over her mouth in horror, realizing what she has done. It's too late. A tram is flying straight at the young man with great speed. Recalling the last moments of his past life, the Chimera Cub asks himself if the young lady was hurt. He understands that if he does not do anything, the heroine will be left alone again. There's no way he can let that happen. The main character feels that her body is becoming incredibly light. It's like she's wrapped in a white shroud, and her soul is reaching for the sky. A huge crowd of onlookers gathers on the square who want to watch the massacre of a traitor to the country. Charlotte moves on shaky legs towards the scaffold prepared for her execution. Crowded people shout unpleasant words after her, call her names, and scold her for her alleged betrayal. They wish the main character all the worst, because they are sure that the girl deserves it. The young lady is very seriously ill. Due to the progressive illness, experiences, and conditions in which she was kept, she is completely unable to understand anything. She can barely move her legs, and the eyes of the main character are constantly closing from fatigue. 3 days ago, she appeared before the prince and all the people accusing her in the courtroom, where she was supposed to be given a cruel sentence. A huge number of ordinary people who were just curious came to see this spectacle. Richard, her ex-fiancé, sat on the throne in front of her. An old man who holds the post of judge is sitting next to him. All eyes were on Charlotte. The trial has begun. The defendant Charlotte is accused of collusion with Ingard, a country that follows the faith of a holy god, hostile to ours, reads the gray-haired old man. He asks the main character if these statements are true. The girl replies in a weak voice that this is not the case. She wants to continue, but a loud voice interrupts her. Its owner slams his fist on the table and shouts at the judge not to let the heroine fool him. Chancellor Aurelia insists that the investigation led them to discover indisputable evidence that she planned to sell her own country for her own selfish desires, without thinking about the future of the state. The heroine replies that this is not true. The Chancellor does not listen to her and points at Lily, saying that her words are enough to convince them completely. According to legend, Lilia became a victim of Charlotte's attacks because she knew the truth about the intentions of the main character. Lily is asked to step forward. The girl walks timidly and says in an innocent voice that this is the purest truth. She notes that her sister harassed her in every possible way, not giving her a pass and not a moment of peace. The sister of the main character lists the girl's atrocities. She says that she often tore up her books, doused her with water, and deliberately spilled wine on her at parties. Lily remembers something else very important. The girl begins to howl, feigning suffering, and tells a story. The main character looks at her wearily and resignedly. The ladies around are fanning themselves with horror, whispering to each other, discussing how vulgar this behavior is. Aurelia says that the young lady's position in the family has been terrible since this shameful incident was revealed. He decides that the girl's bitterness towards her family is one of the key reasons for the heroine's defection to the enemy. The old man asks Charlotte what she will say in her defense. She responds, rightly noting that so far, no evidence has been heard in favor of these allegations made against her. The Chancellor is frantically shouting that the evidence is superfluous. He demands to condemn the heroine. A man rises from the back row and says that Lily herself condemned the girl for these actions, and only a madman in the present tense would not have sentenced her to punishment. The judge says he believes that the truth is really on the side of the accusers. Charlotte closes her eyes hollowly, plunging into her sad thoughts. She can't believe everything that's happening to her. The main character is dishonestly tried without a single piece of evidence, having no idea of her motives, but nevertheless, everyone in court opposes her. The young man standing on the balcony says that he will no longer endure this trial, since the presence of the heroine emotionally affected not only the unfortunate Lily, but also him. The girl looks up at the young man. She remembers how he used to look at her with his clear eyes and say that he was very pleased to be in the company of the main character. The young man shouts that he cannot be at peace with himself, knowing that such an arrogant and hateful woman as Lady Charlotte is walking free with complete impunity. The man sitting next to him also can't stand it and decides to say everything he thinks about the girl. He gets up from his seat and says that he completely agrees with the words of the young man. The girl's brother screams that the heroine does not understand how hard it is for him when he is compared to Charlotte, who is his relative. My older brother used to say that he was proud of his little sister. Another young man shouts that he is constantly being shamed at the academy for being his sister. When he and Charlotte were younger, he promised that one day he would become a knight and protect her from all ills and ill-wishers. The maid says that the service of the main character will forever remain a stain in her life. She thinks it's ruined her reputation. When the kind girl saved her, the little orphan thanked the lady and promised to serve her forever faithfully. The father of the main character is the last to rise from his seat. He glares at her and publicly disowns his daughter, depriving her of her title. When Charlotte was a little girl, her father always said that he loved her. Now, it's gone. The main character's head is spinning from illness and rude words spoken to her. The old man in the judge's place asks for silence and says that he is going to pass a final verdict. In the deathly silence of the courtroom, the man delivers the verdict. He says that the girl is guilty of all her crimes and is sentenced to be brutally murdered in front of the whole city. People from all over the city flock to the square to watch the execution of the prince's ex-fiancée. They all discuss upcoming events and say that they do not envy the fate of the main character. That's what happens to those who betray their loved ones and try to sell their native country to the enemies. Someone's gloating, instructing others' voice in the crowd is heard. Well, it's creepy, says one of the onlookers who came to see the spectacle. This once again shows that the girl was kind to all commoners only out of necessity. He ends his speech. Charlotte closes her eyes. A little girl from the crowd calls out to her and rushes to the main character as fast as she can. The child's mother tries to catch her daughter and screams so that Ari, that's the girl's name, does not run away from her. The main character looks at her and realizes that this child is familiar to her. Charlotte remembers that once upon a time she helped the baby's mother and got her a job. The girl thanked the main character from the bottom of her heart for her help. A stone launched by someone from the crowd flies at the main character. Staggering, she falls to the ground. The guard takes a little girl by the hand and shouts at her to stop running away and rushing to the young lady who is being led to execution. Charlotte raises her tired eyes at her and hears another accusation of betrayal and lies addressed to her. The little girl screams that she believed the main character, but the girl turned out to be a liar. The crowd picks up her childish cry. They all consider the main character a traitor and a sinner. Onlookers are waiting for the massacre, ready to embody it themselves, but the guards stop the raging crowd. One of them is asking for help from the others. A voice is heard from the balcony of the building near which the action is taking place. Someone says that the hour of reckoning has struck, and Charlotte must be justly punished for all her atrocities committed behind the backs of her loved ones. Only maybe it may not seem quite so. People are very resilient. because even with injuries incompatible with life, they can remain conscious for a long time, experiencing unbearable pain. This can make amends to the main character. The girl's brother says that because of Charlotte, their family has become a laughingstock. Richard picks up, saying that too much time has been spent on this terrible woman, whom he saw as his future bride. Everyone agrees with this statement. The father of the main character looks at Lily, standing next to him on the balcony and watching people. He turns to the girl and says that the cause of all her misfortunes is now in the past, and she will no longer suffer because of Charlotte's attacks. She puts her hand over her mouth, trying to hold back the fake tears rising in her throat, and says with horror that anyway, this road her sister is walking was actually meant for her, not for Charlotte. Everyone present looks at her with the greatest surprise. The prince is very surprised that even for such a terrible woman and traitor to the people like Charlotte, Lily still feels compassion. The girl covers her face with her hands and pretends to cry bitterly. Everyone around is touched, saying that she is a real angel. The older brother of the main character promises that tomorrow she will have a new life, which he will take care of. Men surround her and try to comfort her in every possible way, but Lilia does not stop sobbing, bursting into bitter tears. She sits with her back to them in such a way that no one sees her face, which in fact does not have a shadow of sadness or sorrow. In her heart, the mean girl rejoices that she was able to achieve an unfair sentence. She laughs at her sister and mentally tells herself that everything is going exactly according to plan. Soon, the main character will disappear from her life forever. When she gets to the railing, she looks down, expecting Charlotte to start crying immediately. Mentally, she asks herself if the girl is scared. She's trying to understand whether the heroine is filled with bewilderment and rage at the injustice to her. The girl really wants to see the tears of her hated sister. She can't wait to finally hear Charlotte's plaintive voice begging the almighty Lily for mercy and mercy. The girl has a feeling that she rules this world. Meanwhile, the main character silently ascends the steps of the scaffold. She looks in front of her in silence. Heavy and confused thoughts are swarming in her head, but they do not relate to Lily at all. In her memoirs, she refers to her faithful friend Saikyou. The young lady realizes that if he had not appeared in her life, the main character would have been broken a long time ago. She is very grateful to the hero for being by her side and doing absolutely everything for her when all the other loved ones turned away. If it wasn't for the Chimera Cub, she wouldn't have been able to stand still in court and cry her whole heart out. No matter what, the kid was there and protected the main character all the time. She was able to endure all the hardships proudly and worthily without a single tear. Charlotte remembers the perky look of her little friend, his strange sweetness and cordiality. Thanks to him, she was able to strengthen her resolve and continue to endure all the trials thrown at her by the fate of the villain. Lily looks at her from the balcony and does not understand why the main character behaves so calmly and does not cry. She really wants to see her sister's tears. The girl notices that Charlotte remains a thorn in her side until her death. The guards tie up the main character so that she cannot escape anywhere. Someone says that it is time for the great sinner Charlotte to suffer the punishment she deserves. The executioner says that it is a pity for him to raise his hand with a weapon against such a beauty as Charlotte. Being a very lustful man, he notices the curvy forms of a helpless girl. A man comforts himself with the fact that for 40 minutes, a woman is still a woman. The main character looks at him contemptuously and coldly says that this man is a very pathetic and petty person by nature. The executioner swears at her and, with annoyance in his voice, asks the brave Charlotte how dare the main character remain so arrogant in the face of death itself. He wanted to look at the girl's vivid emotions, but he did not expect her to be calm. He raises the point of his sharpened sword over her and shouts that such villains have no place in this world. Lily hangs over the balcony even more in anticipation. The main character raises her eyes to the sky and addresses the CEO, saying that apparently she will leave first. Suddenly, fireballs fall from the sky onto the scaffold, hiding everything that happens there. Lily and everyone watching this spectacle exclaim in surprise and ask each other what happened and that it fell from heaven. The girl closes her eyes in fear and then opens one eye. Through the clouds of smoke from the explosion and the raised dust, which greatly impairs visibility, she notices the familiar muzzle of a small chimera. The CEO arrived just in time and showed up at the peak moment. The main character gasps and is relieved to notice that a small animal has come to her rescue. The monster stands in a ready position right in front of Charlotte, covering her with his body. As promised, he is ready to protect her from the whole world. The little animal selflessly rushes to the defense of the cornered main character. He had a choice to stay to protect the girl or save his own skin, and he decides that he will help the young lady out of trouble. The knight, who noticed the girl's only defender, shouts to his comrades that he is a monster and must be captured at all costs. The chimera cub draws air into his lungs and, gathering his strength, blows cold at the guards running up to him. With the help of a snowstorm, he manages to disorient and delay their approach for a while. When the snowflakes that clouded the eyes of the guards dissipate, one of the knights screams, noticing that the main character tied to the cross has disappeared somewhere. There is no monster in the vicinity either. Seeing what is happening in the square, Lily opens her eyes wide and is amazed that Charlotte and her friend managed to escape the attention of so many people crowded in front of the scaffold. Her face contorts into a terrible grimace of rage, and the girl is outraged by the stupidity of the knights. She exclaims that these idiots are completely useless in this case, since they did not prevent the escape of the heroes. She gets angry and asks herself how they could have missed the main character. The wings of a small chimera rustle in the sky. The animal drags Charlotte in the air, holding her by the dress with its small but strong paws. The CEO is happy that they managed to escape from human eyes. No one sees them because of the invisibility skill that the hero possesses. Preparing to defend the main character, the kid drew attention to the number of people around and realized that he did not want to mess with so many foreheads. He decided that he would simply steal the girl and escape with her through the air. The main thing in this case is to remain invisible to the eyes of people and run away with her as soon as possible. The next point of his plan was to meet with Mrs. Venus so that she would take care of her niece. The chimera cub flaps its wings and encourages the main character, telling her that there is very little left and soon it will all be over. He promises the girl that she will definitely become free. Suddenly, arrows start flying at the heroes, launched by the knights from the square. One of them commands his subordinates to prevent the fugitives from leaving. They try to hit as accurately as possible and injure the animal, but it turns out to be not so easy. The CEO looks down at Charlotte and wonders in horror why they know where the heroes are. It turns out that the monster's ability is not so perfect and not too well thought out for such a risky escape. Lily looks at them from the balcony and points in the direction of the fugitives, telling everyone that her sister is there in heaven. She smiles maliciously and, rejoicing that she was able to discover the characters, says that the main character is somehow flying in the sky. The small but brave animal turns and looks down at his girlfriend in horror. The girl claps her mouth shut with all her might so as not to scream in fear. The hero asks himself why everyone sees Charlotte, despite the fact that he used the technique. A thought comes to the head of the chimera cub. He remembers with horror that the girl has a magical resistance, because of which the magic of the animal does not work on her. Now the hero understands why they failed to escape unnoticed. Carrying not the lightest burden in his paws, the hero tries to deftly maneuver and dodge the arrows flying at them and the attacks of the knights watching his friends from the fortress square. The main character raises her head and looks up at the CEO, who is trying with all his might to save her, and screams that they will never be able to fly away this way. She asks her friend to leave her and fly away himself to escape at least alone. The strong and brave kid squints with tension, but shouts that he will never leave the main character and will be by her side in any situation. He made a promise to himself that he would run away with the young lady. The hero decides that when he becomes human, he will definitely live happily ever after with Charlotte. This is the future the little monster wants for himself and his beloved. He only tightens his claws, clinging to the clothes of the main character, and, closing his eyes, develops the maximum speed he is capable of. The chimera cub screams that he will protect the young lady at any cost. Suddenly, an arrow launched into the air by one of the knights accidentally hits an animal that did not notice it. He wounds his wing and the tip of his tail, depriving the hero of the opportunity to keep his balance in the air. In utter horror, the characters realize that they are rapidly flying down. The crowd begins to make noise, and people shout that the fugitives are falling, and now they will not be able to get anywhere from just retribution. The chimera cub realizes that the fall is inevitable. He decides to soften the landing for the main character and flips her in the air. He selflessly turns out to be below her, protecting the girl's back and creating a safety cushion for her from his body. The guards, who have been watching the trajectory of the hero's fall all this time, discover that they have fallen outside the gates of the city. The head of the knights gives the order that all his subordinates surround the fugitives and prevent them from escaping again. The main character wakes up, lying on the ground. She gets up and tries to figure out why she stayed alive after a precipitous fall from such a great height. She turns to the CEO, hoping very much that her terrible guess will not be confirmed. Charlotte's eyes widen in horror at what she sees. She can't believe that this is happening to her. The girl rushes to her friend, who is sprawled on the ground, and calls out to him. He defended the heroine at the cost of his life. The main character waves her hands in horror and asks baby CEO to hold on, because he has to live. The young lady assumes that she will be able to help him and heal the hero's wounds with her healing magic. Charlotte's gaze falls on her hands, and the girl notices strange iron bracelets on them, which were not there before. She can't believe her eyes, but these bracelets actually turn out to be handcuffs on her. Guards armed with spears run out of the city gates towards the young village. They shout to each other that the escaped heroine is here. With deft movements, they launch shurikens at Charlotte, spinning in the air with incredible speed and flying towards the main character. It will be much easier to cope with an injured girl, they decide. The girl lets out a startled scream and covers her face with her hands, trying to at least partially protect herself from the knives flying at her. Suddenly, a picture appears to her eyes. Gathering the last of his strength and overcoming the pain, the wounded animal who promised to protect her to the end rushes at the main character. He covers the frightened girl with his body, taking all the blows of the shurikens on himself. Charlotte meets the eyes of the hero who saved her for the second time. His eyes are clouded and fade. The last remnants of strength leave the brave little chimera. The monster falls to the ground without signs of life. The girl immediately rushes to the dying friend and screams his name in horror. Bite 1. Two knights prevent the main character from approaching Sio's body. They hold her hands and try to take her back to the fortress. Having lost her only friend and soulmate, the heroine falls to her knees. She doesn't want to believe that the CEO is dead. One of the guards tries to calm her down, saying that the animal is already dead and the screams are useless, but she does not let up. Suddenly, in front of the girl, one of the guards plunges a sword into the lifeless body. He tells Charlotte that the CEO has definitely and irrevocably died. It cannot be returned. It's funny that this guy got what he deserved earlier than the criminal herself, he says with a sneer in his voice. The heroine recalls the pleasant moments spent in the company of the animal. At this point, the knight kicks what's left of Saikyou and says that this monster is just disgusting to him. He turns to Charlotte and asks her to take a closer look at this terrifying sight, reminding her that she will face exactly the same fate as her late friend. The girl is unable to cope with the emotions of the grief that has fallen on her. She remembers how sweetly she and Saikyou hugged and supported each other, and, clutching her head with her hands, she begins to scream with despair and anger at the whole world. The wounded animal is actually still alive, but it is losing more and more strength every second. On the verge of death, he hears the knights trying to silence his girlfriend. They demand that she stop screaming and get up from her knees. The hero hears her crying and realizes that he must somehow stop the angry offenders. He feels his consciousness slowly fading away, and his strength is leaving his weakened body. The chimera cub decides that this way he will really die, but realizes that he cannot leave everything to the mercy of fate because he swore to protect his girlfriend no matter what it costs him. He has no choice but to use his very last resort, miracle evolution. The hero's consciousness moves into the body of the young man he was in a previous life. He asks himself where he is. Although the hero was aimed at obtaining a human body, he turns out to be in his old guise. He looks at his appearance with interest. After making sure that it is really his body, the young man asks himself if he is not dead. He understands that in such an image he will not be able to protect the young lady. He needed something more impressive and combat-ready. The hero turns his gaze to the panel floating in the air. It consists of many squares that look like pixels. A window with a choice appears in front of the hero's eyes. It says that by taking this path of evolution, the development of the human branch will be blocked forever. The program asks if the young man wants to continue. The hero thinks about it. The prospect of developing his monster, losing control of himself, and sowing destruction of everything and everything, in contrast to the previous image of a peaceful animal, does not seem too tempting to him. In his head, the young man calculates the pros and cons of such a choice. Hesitantly, he raises his hand to press the right button on the monitor to select. He pulls himself together and presses the consent button. A girl in a white robe, chained in chains, asks the hero if he is sure of his choice, which he made. The choice is really very difficult. She reminds me that the young man will have no way back. He will lose his consciousness as a person. Does he agree with this? She asks. The young man answers in the affirmative and says that he has made his choice and is ready for the consequences of his actions. The girl asks if he is scared. The hero honestly answers that there is no point in denying the truth. He's really scared. The young man was scared when he was thrown into this world in the body of a monster. He was scared when he was dying, thinking that this would be his last life and there was no way back. The girl asks why she should go to far away. She clarifies if the hero didn't try so hard to become human again. If that's true, then he made a stupid choice. The hero agrees with her, remembering the smile of the young Charlotte. He says he belongs to the category of fools that the girl in white mentioned. The young man understands that at this rate the main character will die unhappy. He knows that he will not be able to accept this thought. The girl replies that this is true, and says she is glad that the reincarnation of the young man was not in vain. There is a crackling sound in the air. The knights try to forcibly drag the resisting main character into the fortress, and do not notice what is happening behind their backs. One of the men raises a sword over Charlotte Hybel, telling her to stop this useless resistance and follow their orders, making life easier for them and herself. At this moment, some kind of creature whirls past, knocking down all the offenders of the main character who met on their way. The girl covers her face with her hands from splashing. She looks at her defender, who soars into the sky, casting a huge shadow on the ground, and remains sitting among the fallen bodies of the royal knights. They paid the price for their attitude towards the girl. The main character looks up. The huge eyes of a creature never seen before are looking at her from the sky. Against his background, Charlotte looks fragile and helpless. She recognizes familiar features in the formidable lizard and turns to the CEO. A huge monster resembling a dragon in appearance and belonging to the Chimera Berserk race emits a terrifying roar and spreads its huge black wings. The reborn CEO has much greater abilities. An enraged monster, hungry only for revenge and battle, opens its huge mouth, dotted from top to bottom with sword-sharp fangs. As the girl in the white robe warned, reborn in a new body, the hero loses control of himself. The surviving guards are panicking and trying to escape from the dragon rushing straight at them. The men shout at each other, asking what kind of monster it is. The more savvy ones advise them to run away. None of the soldiers manage to escape. The crazed monster catches up and torments each of the knights in turn. He breaks through the wall of the fortress and flies into the square, where people are crowding in anticipation of the return of the knights, along with the fugitive and the beginning of the massacre of the main character. He stops in the middle of the square, rising on his hind legs and again uttering a wild cry. Onlookers flee in horror in all directions, trying to escape from a huge monster that has raised columns of dust with its appearance. The hero's attention is attracted by the balcony on which the elite and the prosecution are located. There are shouts and orders to the knights to do something and immediately get rid of this monster, which causes a lot of problems for the nobility. CEO's gaze meets the gaze of the main character's sister. Lily, look at him with disgust and fear. She asks the men standing next to her what kind of animal it is that has caused panic everywhere. Seeing the girl's moody face, the hero's eyes widen with anger and anger. He is ready to pounce on Lily, who has dragged his girlfriend into her dirty games and forced her to stay all alone. The hero develops great speed and rushes straight to the balcony where the heroine is located. He is preparing to strike and crush the main cause of all his girlfriend's problems. The girl watches as a black monster approaches her, mesmerized. She swallows convulsively, but cannot run anywhere to hide from the impending attack. The men standing on the balcony next to Lily are running towards the exit. The girl's father frantically screams that the monster is approaching them. The second man pushes him and tells him that he needs to run inside the building as soon as possible, where they will definitely be safe. Prince Richard rushes to the aid of the petrified girl. The father and brother of the main character call His Highness and indicate where they should run to hide from the attacks of a huge monster. However, the castle walls turn out to be only an illusion of security. The dragon breaks through the window with its body and flies inside the building. He's baring his teeth, ready to finish off everyone who caused so much pain to Charlotte and treated her unfairly. The prince holds Lily's hand and runs as fast as possible, dragging the girl with him. A young man shouts at his ex-fiancee's sister not to stop. The brother of the main character shouts to the monster where he is in order to distract him from others. He teases the huge chimera by saying that he is standing right in front of him. The young man goads the monster to pay attention to him and grab the young man. In this case, the dragon will temporarily distract from the fleeing ones, and they will have the opportunity to hide. But the dragon does not react to the screams in any way. He makes Lily his target, without ceasing to chase her. The girl runs with all her might, trying to escape from the chase. She's trying to figure out why the monster targeted her. Without stopping running, she and Richard decide that their situation is hopeless if they stay here. The heroes realize that the best solution is to get out and blend in with the crowd of fleeing people. In that case, they have a chance. Richard kicks down the front door of the castle with all his might. He shouts to his companion that they need to run to the main square, where a lot of people have gathered. Suddenly, a huge figure of a chimera appears in front of the young man and Lily hiding behind him. The young man stops. An indescribable horror appears on his face. He tries to cover the girl with his body so that the terrible monster does not get to her. The hero shields his companion and tells her to run while he distracts the dragon. The young man bravely looks at his opponent, but the monster believes that the young man is only getting in the way in their showdown with Lily. He throws the hero aside. The blow given to the young man turns out to be so strong that he flies away several meters away and hits the wall. The girl is left without a defender alone with a vengeful monster. At first, the heroine looks at the trajectory of Rashard's flight and makes a startled sound, and then the girl turns her head towards her opponent. An indescribable horror appears in her eyes when she realizes what is about to happen. Like Prince Richard, with the help of a strong dragon's paw, which gave the girl acceleration, Lily flies into the wall, turning over in the air. Hitting the wall, she lets out a moan of pain and falls to the floor at the bottom. The heroine injures her arm and already really begins to scream in pain, examining the injury site. She wants to crawl to safety, but the dragon inflicts a number of other injuries on her. This time, he aims the tip of his tail at her feet. The girl rolls from her stomach to her back and begins to writhe in pain on the floor. At this moment, the knights are approaching her. The girl turns her head in their direction, but does not have time to say anything. Anticipating the enemy's attack, the heroine rolls a little on her back to a safe side. The dragon really attacks the place where the shoulder was before. He is already planning the next attack more precisely and preparing to hit the target. The enraged Saikyou rushes at the girl. She screams furiously for him to stop and not do it. Knights armed with spears are sent to the rescue of the heroine. The girl presses herself against the cold wall, trying to crawl away from the dragon hanging over her as far as possible. She clamps her hand over the injured places and moans in pain. She looks into the monster's eyes. They get bloodshot in their rage. The heroine begs him for mercy and asks him to stop, because she does not want to die prematurely. The monster leans right over Lily's ear and lets out its thunderous roar. The girl closes her arms against him, trying to protect herself from the toothy mouth of the dragon hanging over her. The heroine has never been so scared in her life. Suddenly, the figure of the main character appears between the frightened and tearful Lily and the dragon. Charlotte stands in front of her sister, who is amazed by her act and turns to face the monster. Her wide-open eyes show her excitement. The monster, who had no control over himself, shot her his menacing look. He stops in front of a brave and selfless girl, slightly opening his mouth. The main character stands with her neck pulled into her shoulders and her eyes squeezed shut from the fear that has seized her. A tearful Lily continues to look at her sister in surprise. Her face contorts with a mixture of several emotions. She is still afraid of the nearly finished monster, but also envies Charlotte, who is able to calm him down. The main character tells the dragon that everything is fine and he shouldn't care about what he was going to do to Lily. She calms her friend, distraught after his rebirth, and reminds him that in his soul, Saikyou was never a monster. The dragon gradually calms down. He is breathing heavily, recovering from a temporary loss of sanity. The girl approaches Saikyou and gently hugs him, asking that the hero return to who he was before Rebirth, and calls him by name. Charlotte touches and drops bitter tears on her brave friend. The necessary conditions are met. The dragon has a new skill, atheistic rain. The main character receives the title Blessing of the Goddess. The sky is illuminated with light. Divine rays fall on the heroes, blessing them for good deeds. A blazing fire engulfs the dragon. People watching this incredible spectacle note its similarity to a fiery tornado. They ask each other what it just was. The monster raises its muzzle to the sky and emits a loud roar, which sounds more like a moan. A fire is burning around him and smoke continues to swirl. The main character thinks about it and realizes that, oddly enough, she did not even feel the heat. She gently takes her calmed friend by the muzzle with her small hands and turns to him. Charlotte looks at him with concern and asks sympathetically if the hero was hurt. She helps the dragon to live through this difficult and painful moment. The main character looks at the Saikyou with her clear eyes and continues stroking his muzzle. She hugs him and, clinging to the dragon, tells him that everything is fine. The reborn young man realizes that the most difficult moment is already behind him. The narrowed pupils in the hero's eyes gradually expand, which indicates his calm state. The dragon remembers the girl's words when she suggested that he, who did not know where to go, stay with her forever. She comforted him and fed him vegetable soup when needed. The girl was interested in his time and condition. The main character played a significant role in the life of the little monster, filling it with light and love, which he wanted to return. Charlotte continues to hug the hero. She says that violence is not an option, and it doesn't matter what reason provoked the aggression. The incredible happiness of protecting his beloved outweighs all the pain of other people's suffering. The hero remembers how Charlotte hugged him lovingly when he was very young. It was the main character who gave the baby the name Saikyou, which he still wears. The dragon spreads its wings and straightens above the main character, lifting the air up and emitting a noble roar. The beast raises its head to the sky and releases clouds of smoke mixed with steam from its toothy mouth. The hero's eyes fade and turn into white circles. After some time, the pupils in the dragon's eyes reappear, but this time they have the same appearance as the human pupils. The young man comes to his senses. At that moment, the main character is still hugging him. The hero asks himself what happened and tries to figure out where he is. He is surprised to realize that as soon as this strange voice appeared in his head, the young man's consciousness suddenly cleared up. The hero straightens up and stands on his hind legs. The exhausted main character begins to lose her balance and falls unconscious backwards. The dragon gently picks up her light body with its huge clawed paw. He turns to the young lady, realizing that the girl is alive and just fainted from the emotions experienced in the morning. Another guess flashes through the hero's mind, explaining Charlotte's condition. He looks at the main character with frightened eyes and asks the young lady what she did. The dragon carefully descends in front of her, covering his girlfriend with his wings from prying eyes. Lily, who is watching this scene all the time, curses. She is jealous of her sister and believes that she should have been in the place of the main character. Everything Charlotte got could have gone to Lily. The girl's eyes are filled with tears. She watches in amazement as the dragon picks up his beloved and hugs her to him. The girl believes that everything that happened by accident and is nonsense. She enviously and angrily asks herself why her sister became the main character of this world. Lily believes that it's all the fault of this monster that appeared out of nowhere. If it hadn't been for him, the girl's plan would have been carried out, and she would have gotten rid of her sister once and for all, whom she never tolerated. She thinks that then life would be ideal. She looks from the dragon to her sister's face. Charlotte is deathly pale, and her skin seems to radiate light in this dark world. Lily turns to God, asking if it is fair and right that he gave her special power, but blessed not her, but Charlotte. The spoiled girl demands that God immediately answer the question she asked. Suddenly, a voice is heard in her head asking what is going on here. The girl freezes in surprise. Realizing what kind of voice it is, she raises her eyes to the sky. The heroine's face is again distorted into a terrible grimace. Smiling ominously, she turns to God. A year ago, an event occurred that changed a lot. The girl could not understand how her uncle could actually be a duke. The man sitting across from Lily slammed his fist on the table and wanted the girl to stop screaming like that. The girl was angry. She did not understand why. If what was written in the note was true, then she was not an aristocrat, because she so wanted to live a carefree and rich life, enjoying the fact that she did not need to think about where to get money. Her mother also shouted at Lily to calm down and leave her father's office. The girl did not want to stay in her house anymore and said that she was tired of enduring what she did not deserve. She also understood why she was not allowed into the room. The man said that the life of an aristocrat is not as good as Lily thought, because such people cannot be trusted. Everyone is constantly trying to betray each other in order to strengthen their position in high society and preserve their wealth. The father also added that he left the upper world only because he was tired of all the problems that such people created for him. However, Lily didn't want to listen to anything. She still wanted to leave her current home because she didn't like it. The man said that the girl's mother was a commoner, and it would be difficult for the aristocracy to accept someone with such blood. However, the father also added that if Lily was adopted, then everything would be different. The girl did not have time to mention the Duke. When the girl heard this option, she was delighted, but her father hastened to calm her down and said that his brother already has 2 sons and a daughter, so he will not adopt Lily just like that. This answer did not suit the girl, angering her. The girl was very angry and did not say anything more, she just left. Lily was not even stopped by her mother's screams, but her father said that their daughter just needed to calm down and understand the situation in which she really was. Lily didn't understand why she had to live in poverty. The girl reasoned that if the Duke already had a daughter, she must have been blessed with wealth from the moment of birth, which was not fair to her. The girl was thinking that if that girl didn't exist, then she could become a princess. Suddenly, a voice came from somewhere that pitied Lily, saying that she deserved a better life and a good attitude towards herself. The voice appeared as if in Lily's very head. He continued his speech and said that the girl did not need to be afraid, because the one who stood on top of the world was talking to her, and also protected humanity from various troubles, helping when they happened. Hearing the words in her head, the girl knelt down and looked up, trying to see something. Perhaps she thought she could see who was talking to her and giving her hope for a better future. Lily also assumed that God was talking to her. The girl's face was flushed with excitement, as if someone who could help her fix a fate that she did not like was now standing in front of her. The voice replied that he had appeared to give her skills. The voice also added that it would be pointless if no one could see what the girl would be capable of now. Therefore, in order to attract the attention of the Duke in the adoption, something tragic must happen in the near future. When the conversation stopped, the girl began to think about what she needed to do to fulfill the will of the voice that had spoken to her recently. It was night. Moonlight was shining from the window, and Lily had an idea that she wanted to make a reality. Without thinking twice, the girl decided to kill her parents to prove the seriousness of her intentions. After some time, adults were already lying lifeless on the kitchen floor, and next to the father and mother was their daughter with a knife in her hands. After what she had done, the girl thought that she could get everything she wanted and desired. So she looked up, waiting for the moment when God would speak to her, who came to help her in difficult times, as he had promised her earlier. Lily thought that the time had come when she could enjoy her new life, so she asked God to help her and save her from the fate of a poor life, because she believed that it was her time to shine. The girl's face twisted into a grimace of strange delight. However, as soon as the voice wanted to come to Lily again, he called her names and called her pathetic, and then asked if the girl had enjoyed her life. Lily didn't understand what God meant when he addressed her like that and spoke unflatteringly about her life. After the voice decided to speak out about the girl, he also asked her if she didn't think it was time to accept her fate and become the property of the one she was talking to. The voice was no longer encouraging, but rather terrifying in its presence. However, the girl did not understand what God meant, after which the voice said that she had failed to fulfill the requirements for acquiring the divine gift, skill, so it would be deleted, and Lily Hibble would be sent to Metatron as punishment. The girl did not want to believe in what was happening, because she believed that she had become a favorite of God. Once, in another place, Charlotte was noticed by a creature she knew, so that she would not be hurt. It caught her before falling, flying away from the knights. However, as soon as the dragon caught the girl's body, he noticed that the fragments of stones were attracted to Charlotte, destroying everything in their path. When she woke up, she realized that the CEO was holding her and warning her not to move because of the danger. It turned out that all the fragments, which scattered chaotically in different directions, began to form one large ball, which towered in the sky and remained dangerously hanging. It seemed that he could fall at any moment and crush everything. After some time, the ball really began to descend, so it was impossible to say for sure what would happen next, because after the fall of such a huge object, a catastrophe would have occurred. Someone, having seen something like this, closed their eyes in anticipation. Saikyou, who was holding the body of a girl in his paws, who was still having a hard time standing, watched the pile of stones because he needed to react immediately after what happened. But something happened that the creature clearly did not expect to see. A girl named Lily Hibel appeared on the first level, the Metatron race. Her health was about 1,400 units, attack was 100, resistance and magic power was 1,000. She also had many first-level skills and titles. The girl with blonde hair was dressed in an unusual costume. On her head was a large crown, on top of which was a ball with a ring, like a planet. The girl's eyes were closed, she didn't say anything, and generally looked more like a doll. People gathered in one place, looked up at the sky, and saw that someone was in it. One of the eyewitnesses suggested that it was an angel or some kind of messenger from heaven who was supposed to destroy and rid civilians of the monster. The CEO, standing next to the injured girl, looked at the sky as well as people, peering at what was happening on it. The creature assumed that the body that suddenly appeared in the sky had evolved and acquired new skills for itself. However, the girl did not show any signs of life. Her eyes were still closed, her mouth was slightly open, but she did not say anything and did not make any sounds. The CEO decided that he shouldn't waste time waiting for her to attack. While the body was at the top and did not behave aggressively, the dragon took a pose so that it would be easier for him to climb up and attack. Or if the girl still starts attacking first, he will be ready to fight back and protect those he can. However, the CEO did not have time to do anything, because the young female body began to strike at people standing on the ground. Fires also broke out around the crowd of people, which spread to nearby buildings, and cries for help were heard from everywhere. Lily, although she had her eyes closed, she began to move quickly and look for those whom she really wanted to attack. When she saw the dragon and the girl he was protecting, she chased after them, as the wounded woman noted and notified the CEO. The dragon also noticed that the girl in the sky was aimed at them, so he began to think about what he should do to make do with fewer victims and asked his companion to hide, because further actions could harm her. When Saikyou flew closer to Lily, he could not get close to her in order to grab her, because a barrier appeared in front of him which protected the girl from everyone who wanted to attack her. A seal also appeared in front of the barrier, strengthening the protection. However, the barrier not only kept anyone away from the girl's body, but also dealt damage to an opponent who wanted to attack. In addition to the fact that wounds similar to burns appeared on Seikyou's body, as well as small assistants in armor appeared near the girl. The little knights that appeared quickly flew towards Saikyou, attacking him from all sides. The dragon did not expect that a whole army of small assistants of the girl from the sky would attack him, so he could not repel their blows or dodge. The girl who was saved by Saikyou watched his battle from afar. It was hard for her to watch her friend being tormented by enemies, but she needed to take care of herself, because nearby she saw a sword that could help both her and Saikyou in the future. After the blonde-haired girl turned around, she realized that she needed to get to the weapon as soon as possible, because the sooner she could do it, the more benefit it would bring while her savior was fighting high in the sky. However, as soon as Charlotte ran in the right direction, she saw that she was being chased by the very little knights who had attacked the dragon earlier. The opponents were armed and seriously determined to catch up and attack the girl. While Charlotte was running away from those who attacked her, the CEO saw the position of the one he was protecting. Shouting to the girl, the dragon wanted to distract the attention of the assistants of the one who was high in the sky, but the knights were still nearby. When Charlotte began to fall, she was immediately attacked by the little knights, who were just waiting for the moment to attack the girl. However, they failed to do anything because they were stopped by Kimitsu, who came to the rescue and intercepted the blow. The CEO, who saw the woman, was delighted to see her. Kimitsu said that the dragon had changed a lot, because now he was in a new look, which did not look cute, but in the current situation, on the contrary, it was very good for them. Also, the woman added that, apparently, the girl in the sky was chasing Charlotte. Looking up, Kimitsu saw a female figure flying from side to side, tracking its target to attack her. The woman picked up the girl, throwing her over her shoulder, and told the CEO not to worry about her, because she would take care of Charlotte. She also added that the dragon should focus on getting rid of the monster that was in the sky. When Kimitsu began to run away, Charlotte protested and did not want to leave Saikyou alone because she saw how he was injured. However, the woman replied that if the girl stayed here, she would only interfere with him while Lily Hibble attacked them. When the girl found the one she was looking for with her eyes closed, she did not have time to fly closer as the CEO struck her in the face, distracting her attention to herself. The dragon was angry. He said that he was the opponent of the girl with white hair. The next moment, Saikyou threw his opponent's body into the nearest wall, but she didn't seem to care because her eyes remained closed, and she did not prevent the attack in her direction in any way. Hitting the wall, Lily began to fall rapidly. After the girl landed on the ground, she didn't have any wounds from hitting the wall. In order not to waste time, the dragon decided to make his body invisible so that Lily would not see where he would attack her from again. As long as the CEO was hidden from everyone, he could be anywhere, which he used to be when he was protecting Charlotte. However, the dragon did not develop any sophisticated tactics and wanted to attack from above in order to develop high speed. When Saikyou was already approaching his opponent, she still did not turn around, which could mean that she really did not see the opponent who was rapidly approaching her. However, in the next moment, something happened that the CEO did not expect. As soon as the dragon approached Lily, the girl finally opened her eyes and looked directly at him. There were no pupils in the girl's eyes. They were completely empty. Saikyou, seeing what happened, did not have time to react quickly to fly away in the other direction, so the girl, who was not so close yet, directed her attack, similar to a light beam, towards her opponent. A shot went through the dragon's body, which caused blood to flow from Saikyou's hand. The creature guessed that Lily had used the Eye of God detection skill. However, even though she was injured, Saikyou rushed to the girl, grabbing her by the throat. Lily didn't resist, as if she had fallen back into the state she was in before she launched the attack. The dragon had the feeling that the female body didn't even feel any pain because it could just activate resistance. However, no matter how strong the CEO was, he did not understand who he was dealing with. Lily did not need to make much effort to fight back. She deliberately did not do it right away, waiting for the moment, so the dragon did not expect a new blow. Saikyou's body was thrown back to the ground again. He could only let out a groan of pain, after which he thought that his attacks did not pass through the sacred armor that Lily was wearing, so he needed to come up with another tactic for the fight. After looking at the girl, the dragon also noted that he could not use his invisibility, since with the help of the Eye of God skill, Lily could see everything that was happening around her, even if something was hidden from ordinary human eyes. The dragon, looking at the girl, could not understand how he could defeat an enemy like Lily, because she constantly struck at him hard and she had invulnerability, possessing many divine skills that she had recently acquired. While Saikyou was uncomprehendingly examining Lily's body to figure out how to defeat her, one of the elements of her image behaved strangely, as if it was a separate and independent part, also looking at everything around. After some time, the ball began to spin stronger and stronger. It seemed that he wanted to separate from the crown and the girl as a whole in order to take off and move to another place away from the opponent. However, after a while, the ball, continuing to spin, began to rise high up, lifting the girl's body with it. When Saikyou saw what was happening, he realized that the balloon was not just carrying Lily away, he was still looking for Charlotte. In order not to be late, the dragon immediately flew towards Lily. Saikyou didn't want to lose sight of her, because he knew what she would do if she found Charlotte. The creature screamed at its opponent, calling her very persistent in her intentions. When the dragon began to fly closer to the girl, it was stopped again by the barrier, and later also by the seal that had previously appeared when Saikyou wanted to fly closer to Lily in the sky. However, this time the creature managed to react. After the dragon rested its paws on the barrier, the female figure decided to use one of her skills and activate the beam, with which she attacked Saikyou again. The creature fell to the ground and was severely injured again. After Lily thought she had dealt with her opponent, she turned around and wanted to continue tracking down the girl she wanted to catch and deal with her because she was ruled by hatred, backed by force. After the dragon shouted that he would not let the girl near Charlotte, the female body stopped and turned towards its opponent, starting to attack him with many rays. The CEO dodged, avoiding attacks in his direction. After Lily began to actively fight, which could not be said from her appearance, Saikyou wondered where his opponent might have a blind spot, because if he found her, he could suddenly attack, changing the outcome of the battle in his direction. While the blonde-haired girl was directing her attacks in the opposite direction from herself, Saikyou decided that it would be better for him to accelerate and get closer from the other side until Lily had time to react to his appearance. However, the ball, which was at the top of the crown that the girl was wearing, turned in the direction from which the dragon wanted to attack. There was an eye on the ball, tracking all movements around the female body so that no one could approach her. Due to the fact that the ball noticed the dragon, the rays were immediately directed in the same direction where the CEO was. The creature dodged, but it got angrier and angrier because it couldn't make a single attack because of the girl's new abilities in the sky. But the dragon began to realize that Lily attacked him from her eyes, using blades of sacred light, and the flying thing above the girl's head was the Eye of God, giving her clairvoyance. Also, the female body was encased in armor, not allowing the blows to pass. However, the CEO understood that he had evolved too, so he had a lot of abilities that he hadn't had before. The dragon also assumed that if he could use all the skills at once, he might be able to win the battle. After looking at the sky, the dragon was serious, so he activated the skills Hand of the Monkey King and Flight. After activating the abilities, Saikyou quickly took off and began to rapidly approach Lily, attacking her with his flames. The rays controlled by the girl did not stop. They were still attacking the dragon. The seal that Lily had seemed to keep track of where the CEO was. However, the dragon only thought that he would put all his strength into his next strike. When Lily opened her eyes wide, Saikyou noticed that the female body would soon begin to fight back with renewed vigor, so he struck as fast as he could. This time, the dragon managed to start correcting the outcome of the battle in his favor. After Saikyou's blow, a mark remained on the girl's face. Her eyes closed again, and her body stopped resisting. While there was a chance, the dragon grabbed Lily with his tail and, holding her tightly, approached the ground to hit the body. The female body still did not resist, so her opponent managed to fully implement his plan. As soon as the dragon threw the girl down, a trace in the form of a shallow pit formed in the place where she was lying. After the opponent collided with the ground, Saikyou grabbed her with his paw and began to hold her head so that she could not get up. After that, the dragon began to ask if Lily liked the taste of earth, because he was not going to let her go so easily. Due to the fact that the dragon was finally able to catch his rival, he pressed her so hard to the ground, not giving her a chance to escape, but later, Saikyou felt that the female body began to resist and move to get out of the grip of the creature next to him. Since Lily didn't stop moving, the dragon hit her on the back of the head again to make her head fall down. Saikyou understood that as soon as he stopped attacking the girl, she would immediately begin to regenerate and repair all her damage. In order to prevent this from happening, the creature decided not to take any risks and did not give a single second to the female body to restore its strength. Due to the fact that the CEO wanted to end the enemy once and for all, he continued to stick to his plan. After some time, the dragon was so involved in his duel that his rage led to the separation of Lily's head from her body. However, the CEO did not attach any importance to this, because the girl did not look like a human, she was like a doll that was silent. The female body no longer posed such a threat as before, and the dragon continued to strike at a separate part of the body. Lily's eyes were open, but she wasn't preparing to reactivate her skill and direct the beams at the creature. Lily screamed in unbearable pain. The blows inflicted by the dragon seemed to turn her inside out. The CEO was surprised by such a high-pitched scream. He didn't understand how a human could even make a sound like that. The sound was so unpleasant that the dragon grabbed the back of the opponent's head and, squeezing it tighter, tore her head off her body. He was annoyed. His desire for Lily to calm down was unbearably strong. After that, he flew over the girl's body. Rising up, Saikyou observed the picture created by his paws. The opponent's head fell down like a stone, raising a thick cloud of dust from the floor. It looked as if the weight of the girl's head had increased exponentially. The dragon remained in the air, feeling as if time had stopped for a couple of moments. He stared intently down into the cloud of dust that was slowly beginning to dissipate. Even the CEO's heart seemed to freeze in anticipation of the next moment. Having completely dissipated, the dust revealed a not unpleasant picture at all. Lily was alive. The head grew back into place, and the ill-fated crown soared above it. Bits of armor peeked out from under the tattered cape. The girl's head was spinning unnaturally fast, as if she was looking for something next to her, or someone else. Her gaze was completely blank, but her mind was still aware of the situation. After a couple of moments, Lily turned the body in the direction of the CEO. Realizing that Lily was looking up somewhere, the dragon saw above his head the eye that used to be in the crown. It was spinning chaotically and spinning in the air, as if it was also looking for something. His pupil was constantly rotating from side to side and in a circle. The dragon, staring at the floating eye, seemed to have an epiphany. The CEO came up with an idea that seemed like a good way out of the situation. That eye may be exactly what he lacked for the final victory over Lily. Saikyou rushed up to reach that damn eye. Stretching out its tail, the dragon wrapped its tip so tightly around the eye. Turning swiftly in the air, the dragon built a clear and direct plan of action for victory in his head. The dragon did not understand why Lily needed this eye so much. However, filled with determination, he swung and threw the eye towards Lily. She should have kept her paws off the woman he'd been in love with for a long time. The eye, which had crashed into the girl's body with force, cracked with a quiet crack. From the cracks came a soft whistle and rays of light that seemed to want to break out. It seemed that some kind of violent, sinister force was gathering into a single ball inside this eye. With a deafening sound and the brightest flash of light, the eye exploded. A wave of energy burst out and destroyed the girl's armor and crown. Although there was no visible damage to Lily, it was clear that the force of the explosion had seriously affected her. Falling from a great height, the girl's body hit the visor of one of the shops. Rolling head over heels onto the paved path, covered with cracks from the prolonged slaughter, the girl seemed to come to her senses, uttering a cry of pain similar to the one before. The dragon, flying over the girl, made sure that the monster that had captured Lily's body had completely disappeared. Nodding his gaze at the girl crying in pain, he saw the same old moody girl. The spirit of God no longer had any power over her. The dragon sank to the ground, convinced that the battle was over. Now you can calmly take a break and think about what to do next. However, suddenly Charlotte appeared in front of his eyes, hugging him tightly. It was an indescribable shock. Despite his surprise, the dragon's gaze softened. The girl's skin color seemed much better than the last time they met. Mistress Venus must have given her medicine. This calmed the dragon. Despite Charlotte's tear-stained face, he was glad to see her. Suddenly, the girl shouted his name loudly, clearly outraged and worried. This caused the dragon's entire body to shudder in surprise. Hurriedly and loudly, she kept asking the wounded dragon about what had happened. Just as suddenly, her voice weakened. She kept repeating it. What should she do if she loses her CEO? She didn't know what to do in that case. She was sobbing loudly, her whole body trembling with surging emotions. Charlotte clung tightly to the CEO, not wanting to leave. At some point, her voice regained its strength. Lifting her red and tear-soaked face, she shouted at the dragon that she simply couldn't live without him. Tears were pouring down her beautiful face in large drops. The dragon closed his dark eyes thoughtfully. The dragon couldn't find the strength to touch her with his paws. His heart was about to burst from the surging wave of feelings, the most vivid of which was regret. He wouldn't be able to be with her for as long as she would have liked. Someone's sudden scream pierced the peaceful silence that had formed. The troublemaker called for the raising of weapons against the monster that was still alive, against the dragon CEO. Charlotte and he looked fearfully towards the angry people. The cries of people filled the space. The knights were in a hurry to surround and kill the dragon and the common people. When they saw him next to him, they burst into even greater anger. Everything immediately fell into place in their minds. She was clearly in cahoots with this demon. Surrounding the innocent Charlotte and Saikyou, the knights aimed their weapons at them. Their gazes were filled with fear and disgust. All they wanted was to kill both the dragon and the girl who was clearly supporting him, and who looked back at people with fear. Charlotte snuggled closer to the dragon, her face full of horror and failed attempts to come up with a way out of the situation. The dragon's gaze was different. Thoughts mercilessly appeared in his head, trying to figure out how to save his beloved Charlotte. People continued to gather around Saikyou and Charlotte. They had practically nowhere to run. Each of them wanted to take this chance, while the dragon they saw as a demon was weakened. Charlotte was called a witch by everyone who was not lazy. The dragon began to panic somewhere in the depths of his soul. Charlotte is being branded a witch just because of his presence, but he can't leave her here after running away. Then she'll be all alone. However, someone called out to the people, asking them to stop now. The savior of the situation turned out to be Mrs. Venus. Taking advantage of her position, she ordered people to stop, ostensibly in order not to provoke the demon. It worked, because no one wanted the dragon to suddenly fall into a terrible madness. The dragon was sincerely glad to see Lady Venus. He was extremely grateful for her attempt to help. Venus, at that moment, was trying to figure out what to do now. She stopped them now, but this trick wouldn't last long, so it was worth thinking about. The excited people turned to Charlotte. They wanted to know what she was up to with this demon. Despite her panic, the girl protectively covered the dragon with herself, assuring that he would not harm anyone, but no one believed her. The crowd immediately picked up another shout of curses in the direction of Charlotte and Saikyou. With each passing moment, their rage grew stronger. The only person who did not wish them harm was Mrs. Venus, and that precious time was quickly running out. Suddenly, the CEO established a mental connection with the woman. He informed Venus that he had an idea about how to get out of this situation. Although Venus was amazed by such a connection, she expressed a desire to listen to the idea of a dragon she had known for a long time. The dragon shared his idea. His plan was for Venus to break through the crowd of city dwellers and knights surrounding Charlotte and Saikyou. Next, she had to fight back against the dragon on her own to save Charlotte. Lady Venus could not immediately believe that the dragon was really ready to decide on such a thing. However, this was the only way to protect Charlotte's future. The dragon has already come to terms with the consequences that will follow after his difficult plan. Gathering his resolve, the dragon let out a menacing roar. A general panic began. Despite all their anger, people could not block out the fear they felt in front of the dragon. Charlotte tried to calm him down, but it was obviously unsuccessful. A feeling of regret grew stronger in the dragon's heart. He couldn't share his plan with her, which was why the girl was really scared and confused. But it is necessary. Saikyou activated the Sleepy Blizzard skill by taking air into his lungs. Charlotte, having fallen under the influence of the dragon's skill, fell into a deep sleep. When the girl fell to the ground, Mrs. Venus suddenly screamed. She pretended to be terrified, screaming that the dragon was trying to kill Lady Charlotte. People were confused. people turned to Mrs. Venus in a dumbfounded manner. They couldn't believe that the girl wasn't in league with the demon. However, the woman continued to convince them that right now the dragon was attacking the poor girl and that she needed someone's help immediately. Venus appealed to the minds of people because how could such a fragile girl like Lady Charlotte control such a strong being? But it follows from this that Charlotte is innocent. Had people been wrong about her all this time? Meanwhile, the CO swung at Charlotte, who was lying limply on the ground. He let out another loud roar, as if showing everyone around him his ruthlessness and rage. His figure towered over the fragile girl, and a huge paw began to descend. People were horrified, because Lady Charlotte was in mortal danger right now. Everyone around panicked, still shackled by a sense of awareness of the whole situation. However, Venus, undeterred, rushed straight towards the dragon. Swiftly approaching the dragon, Venus gathered her strength and delivered a precise blow directly into the dragon's body. Her gaze expressed struggle and rage for everyone else, but for CO it was different. This woman is trying her best to help him. The dragon quickly flew away from the blow, crashing its body into one of the buildings. He did not resist the planned attack. Meanwhile, Venus was loudly shouting that Charlotte was now under the protection of the church and the protection of the goddess. Slowly and heavily, the dragon rose from under the rubble. His whole appearance screamed of the impressive strength and fury accumulated in him. People stared at him in fear, while Venus was still blocking CO's path, shielding everyone from him. With a whistling sound, the dragon suddenly soared skyward. From its mouth came such a deafening roar that it could be heard even despite the distance to the ground. No one could see it anymore, but bitter tears appeared in the eyes of the unfortunate dragon. The silence continued until the figure of the dragon against the blue sky became very small. Bursting into cheers of victory, the mood of the crowd immediately rose to the skies. The dragon flew away. This fact was undoubtedly a great joy for everyone. There was no limit to everyone's happiness. It was as if the people had forgotten everything that had happened up to this moment. They turned their gazes to the sky, giving glory to the goddess who saved their lives. Only Venus did not have peace of mind. Everything turned out as planned by the CEO. Just a minute ago, people were acting as if Lady Charlotte was to blame for all their misfortunes, but now they are unreasonably happy that she was saved from death. In the soul of Lady Venus, an aversion to all the people around her was born. The woman just couldn't believe that this was literally the only solution to save Lady Charlotte. A tear rolled down the girl's sleeping face, falling from Venus's eyelashes. She will never forget the sacrifice of the noble and brave dragon. Meanwhile, somewhere high in the sky above the city, a dragon was hovering. He watched the general rejoicing, heard the cheers of the crowd, but his gaze was fixed on his beloved Charlotte, whom Mrs. Venus was carefully holding in her arms. The dragon closed his eyes sadly. He was grateful to Lady Charlotte for everything she had done for him, for all the time they had spent together. But he understood that they would not see each other again, because this would arouse great suspicion towards her. Distant images of the past began to flash before the dragon's eyes. The warmth of Charlotte's embrace ghostly enveloped him, as when he was still a very small dragon. His eyes stung unbearably, and his jaw clenched with intense longing. The memories still did not want to disappear, constantly flashing in front of my eyes like a kaleidoscope, bringing down new waves of pain on the poor dragon's heart. The pain from the wounds on his body was nothing compared to the pain of his soul. Her eyes filled with tears. Unable to find the strength to continue looking at the city, tormented by memories and the desire to return, the dragon turned away. The beating of his wings was as heavy as his decision to leave his beloved. The figure of the dragon was getting farther and farther away in the sky. Lily held Richard's hands in her palms, telling him that she was so scared of what was happening to her. The girl with blonde hair pretended to cry, but Richard demanded that Charlotte be executed immediately for all her machinations. However, when Mrs. Venus heard such an order, she turned around angrily and looked at the guy, saying that even despite the condition of the injured person, they were only thinking about getting rid of the poor girl as soon as possible. Richard didn't like the way the woman was talking to him, so he screamed and added that it was because of Charlotte that Lily was subjected to a similar condition. The blonde-haired girl confirmed this by talking about how hard it was for her. Mrs. Venus was tired of listening to such lies, because what Lily was saying was absolutely not true. After waiting for the right moment, the woman aptly threw something small into her companion's mouth. The girl did not expect this. It turned out that the woman threw something edible to Lily, and because of the surprise, the girl with blonde hair swallowed it. Mrs. Venus asked if she liked what was inside her. Worried, Richard approached the bride, asking how she was. Deciding not to waste time, Mrs. Venus quickly began to ask the question of whether the girl remembers how her parents died and what happened to them. The people around did not understand what was happening, and the woman clarified whether Lily's father had been robbed, as she said. Richard was angry. He didn't want his bride to be treated like this, so he tried to interrupt what Mrs. Venus was saying. However, Lily herself interrupted the young man's speech and replied that it was she who killed her parents once. The blonde-haired girl also added that she had asked her father for her uncle, the Duke, to adopt her for the brightest future. Because the man refused, she was very angry and did not want to put up with her situation. Lily immediately covered her mouth with her hand as soon as she told everything about how her parents' death happened. The girl didn't understand why she was talking like that at all. The woman was pleased and also asked if Charlotte had really done something bad to her. Lily didn't want to, but she said that Charlotte was so patient, so it was very easy to blame her that she didn't want to stop. Lily also added that she had fun having fun and lying to everyone around about what Charlotte was like. Mrs. Venus thought that what she gave her companion to eat would find out the whole truth if you asked her a question. Since the blonde-haired girl probably didn't regret anything, she would say everything as it really was, which was what was needed. Ms. Venus did not want to stop, because she needed to find out everything while the pill was in effect. The woman asked why Lily decided to take the prince away from Charlotte, to which she received the answer that it was all for the sake of greater popularity. The woman continued and asked what Lily personally thought of Charlotte, who was respected by her fiancé. The girl replied that she could not accept those who were better than her, because she lived only for the feelings of pain and suffering of those whom she chose as her goal. After her words, the blonde-haired girl covered her mouth again, because what she said completely exposed her in the eyes of others. Richard, after hearing about why Lily was actually with him. The girl tried to justify herself to her fiancé. However, Lily's emotions got the better of her. The girl could not restrain herself and screamed at people not to look at her like that. She wanted everyone present to serve her, and especially the bastard prince who was nearby. The blonde-haired girl couldn't resist what got into her mouth because of Mistress Venus, so she said what she really thought again instead of what she needed to say. Richard was furious. He glared at Lily, holding back his anger. Thus, Lily was forced to confess to all her crimes, which was why a thorough investigation was conducted. The found evidence of all Charlotte's deeds was revealed, so Charlotte was completely acquitted. People were furious. They blamed Lily for everything that happened, so the kingdom was thrown into chaos. According to the royal decree, the girl was sentenced to death by exhaustion, which was cruel enough but fair for such a lady. The blonde-haired girl was chained to a pole that stood on the street, so it was like she was on display. People, seeing the criminal, broke down and took out their accumulated anger on her, throwing everything they found on earth at her. While stones were flying at the former favorite of all people, she screamed that she cursed everyone who was next to her. She didn't cry or look like she was sorry for what she had done. On the contrary, she was getting more and more angry at people. Blood was flowing down the girl's face, her teeth were damaged, and her left eye could no longer open at all. Lily didn't want to stop screaming. It was as if she was under the control of something invisible, so she shouted one last time that she cursed everyone. After a while, the screams stopped. 3 days have passed since the girl was chained up. All the time Lily couldn't move. She never once, even in all the pain, showed remorse for what she had doomed Charlotte to. Because of what happened, Charlotte's whole family felt guilty because they didn't believe her. The father blamed himself and did not understand why he did not listen to the words of his own daughter, blaming her for everything. He wanted his daughter to know how sorry he was for everything. People were very depressed, but this was not surprising, because almost everyone aggressively accused Charlotte of crimes in which she was not involved. Even the Prime Minister declared her guilty of cheating on her fiancé, which, of course, was not the case. All the inhabitants of the kingdom were discouraged. They understood that they were to blame for blaming Charlotte for everything that Lily told them, whom they believed implicitly. However, besides regretting, the city didn't know what else they could do now. Men and women were hanging around the street, discussing everything that had happened over the past few weeks. After Lily's exposure, everyone immediately came to their senses and could not come to terms with how they behaved. Also, no one else could see the girl. People began to speculate about where Charlotte could be, because many assumed that she was not in the Hebel mansion because of the current situation. One of the townspeople said that the church took custody of a girl who had a very hard time living again. Due to the fact that rumors spread quickly, after a short time, a long queue of people began to form near the church building. who wanted to see Charlotte at least for a short time to apologize to her personally. A man was very persistent. He came closer to the church gate and said that he was very cruel in his statements about Charlotte, so he wanted to ask her for forgiveness for slandering her without having any evidence. One of the servants of the church replied that it was impossible to see Charlotte because only she could choose someone to see. When Mrs. Venus came up, she saw that the queue did not stop because everyone wanted to atone for their guilt. The woman walked past the girls who worked at the church and entered the building. She saw a lone figure standing near the window. It seemed that the girl wanted to be alone, so she just looked at the view from the window of the church. It turned out that the single girl was Charlotte. She has changed a little since she came to her senses. On the face of the girl with blonde hair, you could see calmness and peace because she felt a little better because of the help. Charlotte was standing by the window when Mrs. Venus came up to her. She asked the girl if she was used to the new lifestyle. Charlotte politely assured the woman that she was fine and thanked Venus for the church's acceptance of her. Walking back, Charlotte recalled her first day at church. Venus carefully told the girl that her health was returning to normal. The woman felt guilty that because of her, Charlotte got into this whole difficult situation with a strong dragon. Charlotte didn't think Venus was to blame. Given the dragon's original nature, the girl understood that Saikyou was doing all these things for her. A soft smile touched her face at the memory of him. Getting out of bed, she calmly addressed Mrs. Venus. Taking the woman by the hands, the girl resolutely stated that she would like to be part of the Church of the Goddess, which, in fact, she wants to ask the woman. The woman was a little surprised by this desire of the girl and naturally asked why she needed it. The girl said that, having lost her title, she wants to direct her efforts to help people and pilgrimage around the world. However, Venus saw through the girl. There was another reason for her desire to become a nun. The girl smiled sheepishly. Despite her embarrassment, the girl stood her ground. She wants to find the CEO. Venus did not interfere with the girl's desire. Since she has decided, so be it. And among other things, the woman was sure that Charlotte would make a wonderful sister. After this conversation, Charlotte was initiated into the affairs of the church. She received appropriate training and diligently helped the church. But a little later, Venus began to notice something strange in the girl's behavior and asked her to clarify the situation. Feeling that she could no longer hide what was in her soul and her thoughts, Charlotte decided to entrust her plans to Mrs. Venus. Her face was calm, as if she had already decided everything for herself. After looking around, she went with Mrs. Venus to a quieter place. Meanwhile, there was a very tense situation in one of the rooms of the church. Anxiety seemed to hang in the air. Charlotte's father, Duke Hebel, and the Crown Prince were all sitting together, discussing how they should apologize to Charlotte. Charlotte's father didn't know if she could forgive them for their behavior, but he was sure that at least he owed her an apology. Richard said that a sincere apology should be enough, because the traitor Lily is dead. The next moment, Charlotte came into the room. The men wanted to greet her, but as soon as they turned to look at her, they were speechless for a while. They couldn't believe their eyes, because something strange had happened. The first thing they were worried about was Charlotte's monastic clothes. Each of them was overcome by misunderstanding and panic. What a look the girl had. Did Charlotte give up her noble status by joining the church? There were too many questions. Charlotte froze in place. All her thoughts seemed to be filled with memories of an unenviable past, beatings, insults, hateful views of relatives. However, Venus stood next to the girl, asking the men not to come any closer. Venus stated that, as Charlotte's named mother, she would not allow them to disrespect the girl. But, of course, the strong and masculine appearance of Mrs. Venus caused some embarrassment among men. Her gaze was especially straining. She shielded Charlotte from the men, saying that she would not interfere much. However, she warned that if they start threatening her with their noble or royal blood, Venus will not let them get away with it, and will take care of protecting a girl she knows. Duke Hybel was the first to apologize. He expressed it as a deep regret for everything he had done to Charlotte. Then her father spoke up. He said that he could not justify himself, but he wanted to apologize. Richard was the last to apologize. He turned to the girl, saying that they all fell for the tricks of that treacherous woman, Lily, and that's why they did those terrible things. However, Charlotte's kindness freed them all, for which they are grateful. However, Charlotte was not at all impressed or moved by the men's apologies. The tone of her voice remained even, and her face remained calm. There was no trace of emotion in her expression. She politely addressed Richard and Duke Hybel as she prepared her speech. Charlotte said she had heard enough. However, even though her heart shrinks while thinking about their shared grief, she couldn't feel just that one thing. She didn't even let Richard put the blame on Lily alone, firmly cutting him off in mid-sentence. After measuring the men with a stern and cold gaze, she slowly and clearly expressed her opinion about the current situation. She would never be able to forget the look on their faces when every single one of them, sentenced her to death. It was unforgettable. Taking advantage of the silence created by the shock of the men, Charlotte gently bowed her head, expressing respect. She is grateful that they raised her, but from that moment on, she renounced her family and had the intention to live in the status of a nun. Amazed by such speeches, the men fell into a stupor for a couple of seconds. Richard couldn't even stand on his feet, falling to his knees on the floor. Each of them could not accept such a situation because they already had a plan in which they saw the girl's behavior differently. Charlotte just turned her back on them, preparing to leave the room. She had nothing more to say to these people. She has no business left to settle. Richard, finding the strength, got to his feet and tried to stop his ex-fiancée. Richard screamed about his feelings for her. He loved her, he wanted her by his side. What's the point of becoming a nun if the only happiness for him is their life together? With tears in his eyes, he began to beg her to come back to him no matter what. Mrs. Venus placed her hand protectively on the girl's shoulder, intending to help her leave the room without unnecessary problems. However, Charlotte decided to honor the men with her cold, indifferent, and calm gaze. Meeting their perplexity, Charlotte bowed politely. After waiting for a pause, she turned her back on them again and finally left the room. Richard fell to his knees again, unable to overcome the shock and disbelief that Charlotte had turned away from them forever. A carriage was passing along the road that ran through the field. In it, Charlotte and Mrs. Venus were on their way. Charlotte's thoughts were occupied with a recent conversation with once close people. Maybe she was too harsh with them and hurried. Hearing the girl's feelings, Venus turned her gaze on her. Did Charlotte really, deep down, worry so much about exactly how she put an end to her relationship with her family? However, everything will be fine soon. Arriving at their destination, Venus and Charlotte got out of the carriage. On this path, the friends part ways. Venus asked where Charlotte was planning to go. Charlotte replied that she would go east first. With that, they finally said goodbye. Venus returned to the carriage and went home. Charlotte watched the carriage for a long time. It was a fine day. The sky was clear and clear. A light breeze stirred the bushes and flowers scattered around. The girl didn't seem to want to leave the pleasant clearing. Watching the birds in the sky, Charlotte thought about what had been weighing on her heart for a long time. Are they looking at the same sky with the CEO at this moment? Charlotte wanted to ask the gracious goddess if such a life was really freedom for her. Meanwhile, a fire broke out on the outskirts of Orbaki. The general store of a certain Irwin was on fire. The fire was so sudden and strong that the frame of the building barely held up. The frightened young man sobbed as he looked at the charred corpses of his parents. Despite his despair, his bride and sister did not share the groom's feelings. Calling him a disappointment, they admitted that they are ashamed to realize that he is both a childhood friend and a fiancé. They didn't care about the young man's grief. They only encouraged him to conflict. The young man could not understand why his sister and fiancé had treated him and his family so cruelly. There were so many bitter tears in his eyes that the fiery flashes began to blur. The smoke enveloped everything around, preventing people from breathing freely and easily. There was a young man named Kazuto standing with the girls. The bride explained that she wanted to become Kazuto's bride, but the groom's parents did not give permission to terminate the engagement with Irwin Jr. My sister said that her parents were bothering her too. The young man stared angrily at Kazuto. This arrogant man angered him to the core. What had he done to Leah and Hannah that they had changed so much? Why did he become so dear to them that they even killed the boy's parents? He didn't understand. Looking at the smug smile of the evil guy, the young man could not help but burst into anger. A wave of hatred gave him strength, and he got up from his knees. Everything was blurry before my eyes, but it didn't matter anymore. The young man rushed straight at the young man. Taking out a pistol from his bosom, Kazuto pointed it at the young man. It happened so quickly that the young man did not have time to react. No one in his place could. After just a couple of moments, deafening shots rang out. All 4 shots hit the young man's limbs directly. Men were not needed in Kazuto's harem, so the young man's elbows and knees were shot through. Kazuto's accuracy could only be envied. From the burning pain, the young man let out a heart-rending scream. Hugging the 2 girls by the shoulders, Kazuto only smiled maliciously. He was pleased with the way he got rid of the young man. The guy's sister and ex-fiancé weren't worried about him at all. They voluntarily clung to Kazuto, who pushed the young man off a high cliff. The young man tumbled down the mountain, breaking his bones on the hard surface of rocks and trees on his way. His whole body was torn apart by unbearable pain, which overshadowed almost all thoughts. One day, he will definitely avenge all his loved ones who died in the fire. When the guy finally stopped falling, he was lying on the grass surrounded by trees, filled with painful rage. However, after a couple of seconds, his heart contracted with fear. A huge dark figure towered over him, terrifying in its appearance. The young man tensed his whole body. He wanted to run away from danger, but he couldn't do it. He was sure that there was a monster right next to him right now. However, the strength was rapidly leaving the young man, forcing his eyelids to slowly but heavily close. Meanwhile, in another part of Orbach, Charlotte left the carriage. Looking at the entrance to the city, Charlotte was talking to herself. She was overwhelmed by the feeling that she had encountered something new and previously unknown to her, since she lived in a named estate. Orbaha turned out to be a fairly large city, which was unusual for a girl. Tall buildings towered everywhere, and various plants and shrubs were planted in the center of the city, which formed incomprehensible patterns for the decoration of the street. Looking at the city, Charlotte wondered where the local church might be. It's probably at the end of the street. And indeed, going down to the end of the street, the girl came across a magnificent church. It was very similar to the capital one. Charlotte came to these places relying on rumors about a certain chimera. Based on her own experience, the girl decided that it would be better to go to the local church and ask the priests and sisters, because they definitely had to give the necessary information. Charlotte went to the door and opened it to enter the church. It was quiet and gloomy inside, as if there were no parishioners in the church right now. The girl's footsteps echoed softly throughout the main hall of the church. For a moment, she had doubts. Directly opposite the main doors, on the opposite wall, there was a multicolored stained glass window. The small pieces of glass made up the image of Sonira and the legend of the god of the two pillars, which the girl had heard about since childhood. Looking at the stained glass window, Charlotte thought about the CEO again. After all, she really wanted to see him again, since not a day had passed that she did not think about who saved her life, at the cost of her own, because she always worried so much about him. Thoughts of the dragon soon left the girl's mind. She noticed that there was someone on one of the benches. A flap of some kind of fur peeked out from behind the boards. Not wanting to break the silence, the girl didn't say a word. She slowly walked closer to the right shop. Coming even closer, the girl realized for sure that someone was sleeping on the bench. She walked slowly and cautiously halfway up. The closer Charlotte got, the more clearly she heard someone breathing softly and sniffing. Who can sleep in a church? When she got very close, Charlotte raised her eyebrows in surprise. The flap of wool turned out to be not a piece of clothing at all, but a tail. Moreover, as it turned out, this tail belonged to a young girl. This girl turned out to be a half-human. Charlotte looked at the girl who was sleeping on one of the benches inside the building and asked her why she was sleeping in such a place. However, the girl did not wake up, so Charlotte was worried that the stranger might get sick in this form. Charlotte began to think about what was best to do with someone she didn't know anything about, but other than taking her to bed, nothing came to mind. In a dream, the stranger began to talk and ask for help, calling a man named Sanel. The girl, sleeping for some time in the church, had a dream about the time when she was in captivity. She was mistreated because she wasn't a real person. Such half-humans were compared to demons and witches by ordinary people. However, someone specifically caught and kidnapped such residents, because they could build a good business while someone had a demand for half-humans. The girl did not listen to what the man was talking about. She missed her parents. After the man loaded the girl into the carriage and sat down himself to take her to a certain place, from which the half-human would have left with her new owner, something crashed into the vehicle, breaking and scaring the poor horse. The man who was driving the cart did not understand at first what had happened. However, after some time, he realized that he had been attacked by bandits. Due to the fact that the man was only worried about himself, he decided to run away, left the girl alone under the rubble. The half-human was lying on the ground. She was slightly injured, but she could get up so as not to stay in place. Later, the girl heard someone's voice saying that he did not want to harm the girl, whom, on the contrary, he wanted to save. After a certain period of time, a young man appeared in front of the girl, who smiled and asked the victim if she was all right and if she was badly hurt because he overdid the gunpowder to hit the carriage. The half-human looked at the outstretched hand and did not understand who decided to help her, and, most importantly, why, because people often did not care that someone had any problems. Without thinking twice, the girl decided to accept help anyway and took her hand. After the young man helped the girl out of the forest, he took her to some other place. Someone scolded the guy for doing something dangerous, but Sanel said that he couldn't just leave someone he could save on his own. After Sanel added that if he had not helped the girl, she would surely have died. The woman who scolded him was embarrassed. The half-human did not look very well. She was battered, but she thanked her savior and wanted to leave. The woman with dark hair said that she shouldn't leave because she could stay in this place. The man who came up added that it would really be better for the half-man to stay because he might get caught by some evil merchant again. The girl was ready to be accepted as a full member of the family, so she can just help with the housework while staying at home. The half-human was worried that she might be in trouble, but the young man replied that it wasn't that important. Sanel said that the girl's race would not matter to his family. Appearance also did not affect their impressions of her. It was important to them that the half-human felt comfortable in a new family because she could actually just stay with them. After the young guy added that he would protect the girl from everything that happened to her anyway, he officially introduced himself and waited for the moment when the girl would also tell everyone what her name was. The stranger's cheeks turned very red. The girl was confused. She was not used to strangers treating her so well and wanting to take care of her. It turned out that the half-man's name was Alma. After a while, the girl really began to help the new family with the housework. The man asked Alma to be careful with the axe, but she assured him that it was not difficult for her to work with such a tool. While the girl was chopping wood, Sanel was approached by his sister named Hannah, who said that she had brought him lunch. Alma asked the young man to wait because she wanted to go to lunch with him, but some other girl called the guy. Sanel asked why Lilia had come to him because they had not made an appointment, although the guy was very glad to see her. The girl with long and dark hair replied that she, as a bride, did not need to be warned about her visit because her fiancé was Sanel, so she wanted to see him as often as possible. The girl was smiling. She liked the fact that the guy was glad to see her. Sanel did not even pay attention to the fact that Alma was calling him. He just turned around and left with his bride holding her hand. The couple moved further away, talking and laughing at something, while the girl stood in place and was shocked by what she saw. The dream abruptly changed. A terrible fire appeared before the girl's eyes. The building in which the half-human lived recently began to collapse, and not far from the house lay the skeletons of kind people who accepted her into their family as a new daughter. Alma saw Sanel screaming loudly in pain because he was shot by a man standing surrounded by two others. The girl could do nothing to help the one who once saved her from death. Horror appeared before my eyes because people were laughing at Sanel. After a while, Alma woke up from a terrible dream, screaming her friend's name. However, she realized that she was only dreaming. The girl began to look around and think about where she was. Later, the girl who found her in the church approached her. Charlotte, who was glad to see the stranger awake, said she found her sleeping on a church bench. She also added that the girl looked like she was suffering from some kind of injury. The maid offered Alma something to eat after the rest. However, the girl was embarrassed because she was already being taken care of by someone who didn't even know her. The half-human decided to say that she was not hungry, but the rumbling in her stomach did not allow her to lie. Charlotte smiled when she heard the signs of hunger. In order not to embarrass the stranger even more, Charlotte decided that someone else's rumbling was enough for her to go and bring food. When the maid returned to the room where the girl was lying, she introduced herself as a pilgrim nun. After Charlotte told her name, she looked at the stranger and decided to voice her thoughts that she would also like to know the name of the half-man in bed. The maidservant didn't look hostile, so Alma agreed to answer. 5 days after Alma entered the church, Charlotte sometimes asked her to help her do the cleaning, although she believed that the girl was still weak. However, Alma replied that she already had enough strength and liked to help the church worker. Alma decided to say that, although she planned to leave Orbach and go in search of a young man named Sanel, Charlotte did not have to accompany her because the journey could take a long time, which might cause some problems. The nun replied that it was not difficult for her to do something like that, because her job was to guide the children of the sacred beasts. Charlotte was worried that Alma might get into trouble again, so there was no way she could be allowed to go so far alone. After Charlotte mentioned that she was going with Alma also because she was looking for someone herself, the girl had a question about who such a beautiful girl could be looking for. Alma was somewhat envious of the life of a nun from the church. However, the girl hastened to interrupt such thoughts because she could not give herself up to emotions and regrets. Charlotte was surprised by Alma's abrupt change of mood and asked if she was okay, but the girl immediately decided to change the subject. Alma suddenly became very cheerful and began telling Charlotte about how she enjoyed cleaning with her. The girl took a broom and began actively sweeping the floor, and the nun began to cough due to the fact that dust rose everywhere, of which there was a lot. While Charlotte and Alma were cleaning, a man came into their room. He was surprised at what the goddess's church was like from the inside. The young man with dark hair was in the company of two girls, one of whom was Lilia, who did not expect to see Alma in such a place. The half-human was terrified of what she saw in front of her. She immediately recognized the girl who was Sunel's fiancé, as well as the guy whom she saw from afar, but remembered because it was he who shot at her savior while there was a fire in his house. There was a cave in a remote place from civilization, which was carefully covered with large leaves attached to a long stick. The leaves slightly covered the entrance to the cave, in which a sad dragon was sitting who was having a hard time. Saikyou was very upset that he had to leave Charlotte, because he loved her so much, but he understood that he had done everything to make her live peacefully. However, it was still hard for the dragon to hold back his tears, which did not stop flowing down his face. The creature was forced to leave the young lady, but this did not mean that he began to feel hostility towards all people. Saikyou felt for himself what it was like to be a wild monster who was always alone and away from all creatures. It has been a month since the dragon left the capital, and after such a short time, he felt that he had become stronger. He was at the maximum 100th level, his mana and health were about 4,000 units, and his strength and agility were 3. Also, the dragon was wondering if any of his recent evolutions would become less scaring, because even being the way he is, he will be able to find an outcome that he can follow so that people finally like him and not be so scary to them. After looking at the various versions of his appearance along with his skills, the CEO did not notice anything good because all the options were similar to each other, since in any case he remained a mad or cursed chimera with strong abilities in battle. However, the creature wondered what kind of magical abilities it had. Rising up a little, Saikyou looked at the sign that appeared in the air and saw on it some mentions of shark skin skills, as well as gravity magic. Deciding that such abilities would be useful to him in the future, the CEO decided to add them to himself in order to activate them if possible. After the dragon agreed to the addition, he lit up for a while, gaining several new abilities. After the acquisition, the dragon decided to activate the shark skin skill on himself to try it out. After activating the ability, Saikyou saw that the skin on one of his paws had become different in texture, which was more like strengthening muscles for battle. Taking a nearby stone, the creature decided to try out the skill in order to sharpen the boulder for future use. It turned out that the CEO wanted to make pots or plates, which would have a positive impact on his socialization in society. Supporting a small stone with one hand, the dragon began to strike quickly with precise movements so that parts of the boulder would break off, forming what was necessary to get as a result. Small stones flew in all directions, breaking off. After a short period of time, the dragon stopped striking at the selected boulder. After that, the creature raised the bowl above its head, which it had been so diligently making with the help of a newly acquired new skill. Saikyou also decided to make a pot, and after they were ready, he thought that this was the first time he would be able to cook something since he was reincarnated. However, the dragon's plans were not destined to come true, as he dropped everything because of a loud scream. The bowl fell to the floor and broke into many pieces, so it could no longer be used. Saikyou was shocked. He did not expect that someone would suddenly scare him, which would cause him to drop his product, which he so diligently made of stone. To deal with the one who dared to distract the CEO from his important business, the dragon ran out of his hiding place and headed into the forest. All he had in his head was that he would deal with everyone who distracted him and caused his bowl to fall to the floor and break. Passing by another tree, Saikyou saw that a human body was lying on a small field. The young man looked young enough, but he was unconscious, so it was not entirely clear what had happened to him and how badly he was injured. The dragon did not think long about what he needed to do, because he would never leave someone who needed help. After some time, the CEO was able to bandage the wounds that he saw on the young guy, believing that this would be enough for the first time. Looking at the revealed characteristics of the man, the CEO saw that the young man's health was slowly recovering. Looking at the skills and abilities, the dragon realized that the stranger reminded him of Lily because she possessed something similar. Since the young man did not wake up, the creature decided that for a while, it should just be left in a convenient place. However, it was not clear what would need to be done next when the person wakes up. The CEO was thinking of showing the young man what he could do. Saikyou also thought that after the young man wakes up, he will need to be escorted to the nearest village so that people can see how kind the dragon was. Because of his thoughts, the creature did not immediately notice how the guy woke up and sat down. The dragon turned around and saw that his plan would not be implemented now because he did not have time to prepare a new plate in order to show it to a person. However, as soon as the young man saw the dragon, he screamed in fear and thought that they were going to eat him. The young man wanted to do something, but could not, because his arm hurt a lot. Getting up, the young man tried to move, but he did not have the strength at all. The CEO tried to stop the man, but he did not realize that he was not in danger. Due to the fact that the young man thought of CEO as a monster, he did not trust him, so he fell to the ground and began throwing stones at the dragon so that it would not approach. The creature was trying to figure out how to calm the man down and make him believe that he would not attack. After some thought, the CEO decided to try one of his options. Taking some berries that he had picked earlier in his tail, the dragon handed them through a gap in the rock to the guy, who was very scared that he saw a tail next to him. Looking at the outstretched berries, the young man said that the dragon wanted to fatten him up so that he could eat him later, so he was not going to take anything from the monster. The young man told the CEO not to approach him, which made the dragon very upset and drooped. The creature did not know what else to do to make the young man believe in the purity of his intentions. The young man thought that the dragon was behaving very strangely because he did not attack him, but was upset that the man did not take his food for himself. After a short thought, the young man still picked up a handful of berries and asked the dragon if he could eat them. The young man did not know what the CEO was up to, but he understood that the creature did not want to harm him for some reason.